blood. That's where Harry Morgan's story really begins for us. A 3-year-old boy sits in a rusted shipping container, frozen in a lake of his mother's blood. Sirens wail outside. The door slams open and a silhouette fills the frame. A Miami cop, badge glinting, eyes taking in the horror and the child at its center. This is Harry, the man the show sells as a savior. The man who will decide that this little boy is not a victim to be healed, but a problem to be managed. Cut to that same boy, a few years older, standing in a backyard at night. A shovel, a trash bag. Harry's hand on his shoulder, calm voice explaining how to bury what no one can ever find. Stalk the urge. Control the scene. Leave no witnesses. Over this, we hear it for the first time. Like doctrine, the code. Never get caught. Only those who deserve it. Always clean up. Harry's words sound protective. The images don't. Let's kick things off by tearing that comfort apart. As Harry's voice lays out rules like a training manual, the montage fractures. A body discovered in a swamp. Police lights strobing across plastic sheeting Dexter thought was hidden. Crime scene tape wrapping around another perfect plan. Doak staring at Dexter with that instinctive suspicion. Lagerda pinning photos of Bay Harbor victims to a board, the investigation tightening. Each time, we still hear Harry's calm instructions running underneath, an invisible thread stitching through every failure, every collapse. In public, Harry is framed as the model cop, commendations on the wall, smiling at a press conference, holding baby Deborah in one arm and young Dexter in the other, the picture of a stable father who rescued 2 children from chaos. But we cut hard away from that image. Harry in a dim car, watching teenage Dexter stalk a man down an alley. Harry in a motel room with Laura Moser, the woman who is both Dexter's biological mother and Harry's confidential informant. Harry passing a file across a table, steering his adopted son toward a criminal the courts couldn't touch. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on what Harry says about the code, but on what those rules actually do to Dexter's psychology over time. We see adult Dexter in a kill room, plastic glistening, knife raised. He looks up at the corner, not at his victim, but at the ghost of Harry standing there, judging, coaching, haunting. Cut to Deborah's body on a hospital bed, ventilator silent, Dexter's hand on her lifeless arm. Harry's voice continues over it, insisting the code was meant to protect family, to limit damage, even as we stare at the ultimate consequence of that design. Finally, we land on the moment Harry can't escape. Teenage Dexter in a grimy room, dismembering a body with clinical focus, blood on his hands. Harry in the doorway again, but this time the silhouette trembles. His face collapses as he understands what he has built. Smash cut to Harry in a hospital bed, monitors beeping, eyes empty with a different kind of terror. The line goes flat. The sound cuts out. In this video, we're going to treat that silence as the central question. Did Harry save a broken child from self-destruction? Or did a decorated cop construct a weapon he could no longer live with? Along the way, we'll trace how every season's illusion of control bends back to that first decision in the shipping container, and to the man who thought he could write a code that would keep the monster on a leash. Harry Morgan didn't just find a traumatized child in a pool of blood. He found a problem he thought he could solve with a plan. And that's where everything starts to go wrong. Let's kick things off by contrasting the story we usually tell ourselves about Harry with the story the show is actually telling. The fan narrative is comforting. Harry as the tragic but noble father, the one good cop who pulled Dexter out of that shipping container and gave him a moral compass. He sees the dark passenger, names it, and designs a code to keep it from spilling onto the innocent. In that version, every flashback is a lesson. Every inner voice Harry's seen is a guardian angel moment. But look closer at those same scenes, and a darker psychology emerges. We watch Harry discover young Dexter killing animals, not and recoil in horror, but lean in with a kind of clinical curiosity. We see him walk his foster son through crime scenes, teach him how investigations work, how to avoid evidence, how to wrap a body so the ocean takes the blame. Before Dexter ever tapes plastic to a wall, Harry is already scripting the ritual. The focus is not just on stopping a killer, it's on engineering a controlled one. That's the thesis of this entire breakdown. Harry's life is defined by one catastrophic miscalculation. He believes he can contain a serial killer with a homemade code. He believes that if he narrows Dexter's targets to criminals who deserve it, if he builds in rules about not getting caught, he can bend murder into a tool that serves his badge, his conscience, and his career. Every major tragedy in Dexter's trajectory, from Brian's return in Season 1 to the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, traces back to that belief. To keep this clear, we need to reframe how we watch the series. When Dexter consults Harry in his head, we're not seeing pure wisdom from beyond the grave. We're seeing the ghost of a failed plan, the echo of a cop who trained his son to be a weapon and then couldn't live with the consequences. Every flashback of Harry coaching Dexter to fake emotions at school, every warning about getting sloppy, becomes evidence of a system straining under its own weight. How long can a design like that hold before it collapses? And crucially, the code itself is not neutral. It's a coping mechanism. It lets Harry bury his guilt over Laura Moser, his corruption as an undercover cop, his fear that his career and family will implode if the truth comes out. The code is built to protect Harry's world first, Dexter's soul second, and actual victims almost not at all. In this video, we're going to treat Harry's affair, his secret mentoring, and his suicide as one continuous through line, a man who would rather die than face what he created. Each major section will peel back another layer of that collapse, from decorated officer to adulterer to architect of the Bay Harbor Butcher. By the time we're done, Harry won't read as Dexter's savior anymore. He'll read as the show's original and most dangerous failed savior. So to keep this clear, we're not about to run a true crime scoreboard of Dexter's body count. We're running an investigation into Harry Morgan's design. From a cop stepping into a blood-soaked shipping container to a ghostly father lecturing from the passenger seat, we're tracking a single, evolving plan. How one man tried to build, manage, and outlive a killer. In this video, we're going to treat Harry's involvement as a sequence of deliberate phases, almost like case files in his head. First, discovering 3-year-old Dexter sitting in Laura Moser's blood and deciding not just to rescue him, but to keep him. Then, recognizing the early signs of bloodlust and constructing what he calls the Code of Harry. After that, using that code as a hidden weapon against the system he no longer trusts, all while hiding the most important evidence of all, his own affair with Laura and his role in her death. The focus is not just on what Dexter does with the code, but on how Harry assembles it. We'll watch him teach a child to fake emotions at school, to mimic grief at funerals, to study crime scenes not as tragedy, but as opportunity. Short lessons, short reassurances, longer, darker implications. Harry frames it all as love and protection, yet functionally, he's running a long-term psychology experiment on his adopted son. Can you channel a compulsion into rules? Can you turn a trauma victim into a precision instrument? Each major section will break down one of Harry's plans in that experiment. The early training sessions with animals and slides, the tactical rules about not getting caught, the strategic choice to point Dexter at criminals who slip through legal cracks, his decision to conceal Laura's identity, and his own infidelity from both Dexter and Debra. Even his suicide in that hospital room, after seeing teenage Dexter dismember a body, becomes part of the design Dexter thinks he inherited. Harry believes he's pulling the plug on a failed project. Dexter interprets it as a final command to keep going. Along the way, we'll track 3 overlapping layers of Harry at once. The real man in the flashbacks, the idealized mentor who lives on as Dexter's internal voice, and the later revelations that blow holes in both. What happens to a code when you discover it was built on lies? What happens to a plan for control when the architect is exposed as a hypocrite? The central question for this section of the essay is intention versus outcome. At every stage we'll ask, what did Harry think this rule, this secret, this sacrifice would accomplish? And how did it actually accelerate the collapse of Dexter's life seasons later? The next part of the video will kick things off at the beginning of that trajectory, Harry opening that container door and choosing to raise his own future Bay Harbor butcher. Harry opening that container door is the origin point, but to keep this clear, we need a framework for everything that goes wrong after. Harry doesn't just make one mistake. He builds an entire system of mistakes. Operational, relational, existential, 3 layers of failure that stack on top of each other until Dexter's life. And everyone in it collapses, so let's kick things off with Category 1, operational failures. These are the places where Harry's practical rules about stalking, killing, and covering tracks simply don't work in the real world. On paper, it all sounds airtight: stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room, leave no evidence. In practice, we watch Dexter almost lose everything because Harry never accounted for pattern recognition, evolving forensics, or Dexter's own overconfidence. Think of the Season 2 marina scene. Dexter dumping trash bags full of bodies into the ocean, a ritual Harry helped design, only for currents and chance to push those bags back toward shore and straight into an FBI investigation. The plan was supposed to erase Dexter. Instead, it writes the phrase Bay Harbor Butcher in headlines. Category 2 is where the damage cuts closer to home: relational failures. Harry's solution to Dexter's psychology is to train him to fake connection, to mimic normal. Smile at Rita. Say the right thing to Debra. Pretend the focus is not just on survival, it's on camouflage. But Harry underestimates the cost of building an entire personality on performance. How do you build trust with someone who has been taught that every emotion is a tactic? We see this in those early scenes where Debra looks at Dexter a beat too long, sensing something off when he doesn't react to their father's death the way a real son would. She can't name it yet, but the distance is there. That emotional dead zone will later explode into betrayal when she finally learns what Dexter is. Harry never planned for that, because he treated love as a cover story, not a consequence. Then there's Category 3, existential failures, where the entire premise of the code itself falls apart. Harry tells Dexter a curated version of Laura Moser, hides the affair, hides his own role in the chain of events that led to that blood-soaked container. He sells the code as a moral shield, a way to give Dexter purpose. But the central question is, what happens when Dexter learns that shield was built on lies? The truth of Harry's suicide is the clearest example. For years, Dexter romanticizes it as a noble sacrifice, a father who couldn't bear his own illness. Later, he discovers the reality. Harry walked in on teenage Dexter dismembering a body, saw exactly what he had created, and killed himself out of horror. That is not a guiding light. That is a void. In this video, we're going to use these 3 categories as our spine. Each major section will trace Harry's trajectory from decorated Miami cop to the ghost in Dexter's head, tracking how operational slips, relational fractures, and existential revelations escalate from Season 1 through New Blood. Along the way, we'll see that every solution Harry offers is really just the next stage of the collapse already in motion. To keep this clear, we're going to follow Harry's story the way he actually lived it, not the way Dexter remembers it. That means starting before the shipping container, when Harry is still a decorated Miami cop, running undercover operations that will accidentally script his entire family's fate. Let's kick things off with Harry embedded in the drug world around Laura Moser. We'll watch him cross the first line, not just using Laura as an informant, but falling into an affair that fuses his investigation with his desires. From there, the plan is simple in Harry's mind. Clean up the streets, protect his informant, go home to his perfect family. The central question is, what happens when that plan collides with a chainsaw in a shipping yard and a 3-year-old sitting in a lake of blood? From that image, we move into the construction phase. Harry discovers young Dexter's bloodlust, and instead of seeking treatment, he designs the Code of Harry as a tool of control. Each major section will track this training chronologically: the stray animals, the staged crime scenes in abandoned lots, the lectures about never getting caught. We'll cut between these flashbacks and Dexter's adult rituals to show how every careful plastic sheet and blood slide is really Harry's voice, echoing through time. Along the way, we'll treat every new revelation about Harry as a retroactive grenade. When we learn about the affair with Laura, we'll jump back to those early rescuer scenes and reframe them as guilt management, not heroism. When the truth about Laura's murder surfaces, we'll go back again and ask, was Harry saving Dexter or trying to atone for putting Laura in that container in the first place? The focus is not just on biographical detail. We're stripping out the case of the week noise. We won't recap every investigation or every killer. Instead, we'll zoom in on pressure points where Harry's influence directly shapes Dexter's choices, or where that influence fails. Harry coaching Dexter to fake emotions at school. Harry steering him toward criminals who escape justice. Harry walking into that dismemberment scene in the shipping yard and realizing his code has produced something he can't psychologically handle. Structurally, each era of Harry's life ends on a failure. The undercover affair ends with Laura's death. The training era ends with Harry's hospital suicide. The posthumous mentor era fractures when Vogel exposes the code as a clinical experiment. After each collapse, we'll jump forward to show the echo. Dexter killing Brian, lying to Deb, clinging to the code as his only identity even as it destroys every relationship. By the time we reach New Blood, Harry's presence is gone. No more ghost dad riding shotgun, no more nightly performance reviews. But his absence becomes its own haunting, a vacuum where the failed code used to be. We'll track how that empty space invites new voices. Deb, Harrison, and ask one last question. Without Harry's rules, does Dexter finally wake up, or does he just run the old plan to its absolute irreversible end? To understand that vacuum Harry leaves behind, we have to rewind to a version of him that Dexter never really knew. Before the ghost in the kill room, there was a flesh and blood cop in Miami Metro, respected, relentless, and already watching the system fail in slow motion. We see him in those early flashbacks, shirt sleeves rolled up, case files spread across a cluttered desk, arguing with brass about letting a suspect walk because a warrant was bad or a confession was tainted. From a distance, it looks like idealism. Up close, it's frustration calcifying into something harder. The central question for Harry isn't, is this man guilty? It's how many more bodies will pile up while we wait for paperwork. On paper, Harry is the cop you want on a case. He's sharp, he reads crime scenes well, and other officers defer to his instincts. But even before the shipping container, we watch those instincts push him off the official map. He goes undercover in the drug trade, embedding himself in Laura Moser's world, and the investigation stops being clean lines and starts being blurred edges. Informants paid in cash, meetings off the books, lies to internal affairs presented as necessary tactics in a larger plan to take down something bigger. To keep this clear, Harry doesn't wake up one day and decide to weaponize a child. The trajectory is incremental. First, he bends a rule to keep a dealer talking. Then he shields Laura, a confidential informant and secret lover, rationalizing that protecting her will protect the case. Then he hides that affair from his family because, in his mind, the job and its consequences are things they simply wouldn't understand. One compromise at a time, the good cop becomes a man running parallel lives. At home, he's the affectionate father, the steady presence at the dinner table, the one teaching Deborah how to shoot and telling both kids that justice matters. In the field, he's already living by a different code. One that says outcomes justify methods. That contrast is the pattern Interrupt the Show slips in long before Dexter ever wraps a victim in plastic. Can someone preach law and order at breakfast, then falsify a report by lunch without something eventually breaking? Along the way, we see the early template for the double life he'll later train Dexter to perfect. Harry can look his wife in the eye while hiding an affair. He can mentor young officers on proper procedure while quietly coaching informants to toe the line between witness and accomplice. He can tell himself that every small deception is in service of control, of preventing a larger collapse of public safety. By the time Laura Moser is butchered in that shipping container, Harry is already standing at a crossroads. He's a cop who knows the system's limits, who's felt his own investigation spin out of control, and who's been personally burned by the very criminals he tried to manage. When he steps into that scene and finds a 3-year-old sitting in blood, it doesn't just horrify him, it tempts him. What if the law can't handle what's coming next? What if the only way to fix this is to build something darker than the system he's lost faith in? Harry steps into the shipping yard expecting another brutal crime scene. He walks into a creation myth. Rusted metal, sodium lights, the stink of oil and salt. Then the container door grinds open, and everything we've been talking about, his broken faith in the system, his history with informants, crystallizes in one image, blood on every surface, walls painted red, limbs scattered like trash. The investigation stops feeling procedural and becomes ritual. And in the center of that ritual, a 3-year-old boy, sitting silently in a congealing pool of his mother's blood. No crying, no screaming, just that vacant, frozen stare we'll one day recognize as Dexter's baseline. To keep this clear, the show wants us to feel what Harry feels in that instant, the sense that something in this child has already snapped. As a cop, Harry is horrified. This is a failure of protection on every level. His case, his informant, his plan to bring down a drug crew without collateral damage. As a father, he's hit with raw pity. What do you do with a child who has watched dismemberment at point-blank range? But there's a third reaction forming underneath those two, and this is where the psychology of the code begins. Harry looks at Dexter and senses not just trauma, but imprinting. This kid hasn't just witnessed violence, he's been marinated in it. We're not told everything yet, but the camera lingers long enough to make one thing obvious. Harry recognizes the woman on the floor. Laura Moser isn't just another victim. She's his informant. She's his affair. She's the person he put in harm's way with a reckless undercover plan, and now her body is part of the crime scene he's supposed to process objectively. The focus is not just on Harry's grief, it's on his guilt. Every drop of blood around Dexter is also a measure of Harry's responsibility. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this container as the original point of collapse. Harry already believes the system fails victims. He's watched cases fall apart, watched monsters walk, watched paperwork erase lives. So when he lifts Dexter out of that blood, it doesn't feel like rescuing a random orphan. It feels like being handed a consequence, or maybe, in his mind, an opportunity. If the law can't stop men, like the ones who killed Laura, what if this child, shaped carefully, could? Here's the chilling turn. Harry doesn't treat Dexter as a trauma victim who needs therapy, distance, and healing. He treats him as raw material. Consciously or not, he decides that the darkness etched into this boy can be managed, redirected, turned into a tool the courts will never have. That's where the code is really born. Not in a rulebook, but in a cop standing in a shipping container, convincing himself that weaponizing a child might somehow be justice. From here on, each major section will track how that experiment unravels. From here on, each major section will track how that experiment unravels. But before we watch the collapse, we have to understand the design. Because Harry doesn't just improvise a few guidelines for a troubled kid. He engineers a private justice system and calls it a childhood. Let's kick things off with the basic architecture of the code. Never get caught. Only kill those who deserve it. Gather irrefutable proof. Always clean up the scene. On paper, it's a safety net. In practice, it's a veteran cop reverse engineering the perfect crime from the inside out. Every tenet is Harry's training and investigation experience weaponized, surveillance before stalking, evidence before judgment, forensics before blood. Never get caught sounds parental, but it's really procedural. Harry teaches Dexter how cops think, how patterns trigger suspicion, how evidence chains are built. The rule isn't about morality, it's about control. Only those who deserve it feels like a conscience. Yet Harry never hands Dexter a philosophy class. He hands him case files, rapists who walked on technicalities, killers freed on a bad warrant. He's not asking Dexter to wrestle with the central question of what evil is. He's asking him to finish the paperwork the courts left open. To keep this clear, we can see Harry's dual motivation in those flashbacks, where he takes teenage Dexter to watch a freed criminal walk out of court. Harry stands there, jaw tight, explaining that some people just slip through. On the surface, it's a warning. This is what you'll feel drawn to. Underneath, it's permission. Dexter becomes the system's shadow, the enforcement mechanism for Harry's frustration with his own job. That's where the third and fourth rules lock in. Gather irrefutable proof is Harry's way of turning Dexter into a one-man internal affairs unit. No kill without a case. No case without documentation. Then, always clean up the scene closes the loop. Plastic sheeting, drain cleaner, ocean dumps. The focus is not just on stopping Dexter from leaving clues, but on making sure no future investigation can ever expose Harry's complicity. And baked into all of this is a staggering arrogance. Harry assumes he can reliably define who deserves to die. He assumes Dexter will always follow the plan exactly, that a teenager rehearsing dismemberment in a garage will never improvise. He assumes he can stand next to a killer he trained and stay morally clean because he never holds the knife. How long could that illusion really last once Dexter's life moved beyond controlled scenarios and neat little files? Along the way, every safeguard doubles as a future point of failure. Never get caught collapses the moment Dexter builds a pattern sharp enough for Dokes to smell. Only those who deserve it fractures when personal grudges and emotional attachments enter the equation. Irrefutable proof becomes a liability when blood slides and trophies start their own investigation trail. and always clean up turns into an impossible standard once Dexter has a job, a wife, a child, and no time to maintain Harry's fantasy of precision. The code starts as Harry's attempt to contain chaos. The next phase of Dexter's trajectory will show us how that containment system becomes the fuse. That fuse doesn't start with knives and plastic. It starts with a smile. Flashbacks show Harry sitting across from young Dexter at the kitchen table, not asking how he feels, but rehearsing how he should look. When someone smiles at you, you smile back. He walks Dexter through responses to classmates, how to laugh at the right time, how to say he's fine on command. Basic human interaction becomes a script, not discovery, performance. The focus is not just on teaching a child manners. It's Harry treating empathy like a foreign language Dexter can never truly speak, only memorize phonetically. When a boy at school gets hurt, Harry doesn't ask Dexter what he felt. He asks what he showed. Did you look concerned? Did you say the right thing? From the start, the plan is clear. Control the appearance, surrender the interior. To keep this clear, Harry is not neutral about Dexter's nature. He tells him again and again that he was born in blood, that he's different, that real feeling is beyond him. The central question for young Dexter isn't, what do I feel? It becomes, how do I hide what I am? Harry answers by reinforcing the belief that there is no real feeling to find. You're a monster, so here's how to fake being human. That belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that stretches across every season. When Dexter later feels something for Rita, he doesn't trust it. He frames her as a shield, a cover, a way to look normal instead of a woman he might actually love. With Debra, he misreads lifelong attachment as mere habit, then as dangerous weakness. With Harrison, he flips between numb distance and panicked overprotection, because no one ever taught him how to explore emotion, only how to mask it. How do you build a real relationship when your foundational training says your inner life is a lie? At the same time, Harry is introducing very practical skills. We see him take Dexter to kill animals, channeling that urge into controlled experiments. He walks him through crime scene awareness, how investigators think, how blood spreads, how to clean it up so no investigation can trace it back. Intimacy with Dad means learning to slit a throat cleanly, to wrap plastic tightly, to leave no trace. This is where the psychology gets truly warped. For Dexter, bonding equals violence. Father-son talks happen over corpses and crime scenes. Comfort is delivered in the language of the code. Along the way, Harry is merging affection with dismemberment, trust with secrecy, safety with premeditated killing. Is it any wonder Dexter's idea of love later shows up as who he lets into his rituals, not who he lets into his feelings? Let's kick things off with the most devastating lesson buried in all of this. Harry isn't just teaching Dexter how to kill safely. He's teaching him that his true self is a monster that must be hidden at all costs. That judgment doesn't die with Harry's suicide. It becomes the ghost in Dexter's head, the inner Harry who polices every impulse. And when that ghost finally gets challenged, when Dexter learns what really drove Harry to the hospital bed, that's when the code stops being a shield and starts to look like something else entirely. And once the ghost starts to crack, we have to ask, where did the rot actually begin? Not in a kill room, in a bedroom, in a car, in a series of secret meetings between a married cop and a frightened woman who should have been his protected witness, not his lover. To keep this clear, we need to lay out the basics. Harry Morgan, respected Miami officer, husband and father, is running an undercover investigation into a cartel operation. Laura Moser is his in. She's a vulnerable informant, a woman already entangled with dangerous traffickers, and Harry's entire plan to bring these men down depends on her. She gives him names, routes, the location of that fateful shipping yard. She is supposed to be a piece on his chessboard. Instead, he crosses the line and turns her into something else. We're told the affair in fragments, but the implications are huge. Harry starts visiting Laura off the books, staying longer than necessary, blurring the boundary between asset and attachment. He's not just managing risk, he's indulging it. The focus is not just on the romance itself, but on the way it contaminates his judgment. Is he still making tactical choices about an investigation, or emotional choices about a woman he's now personally responsible for? He can't be both the objective cop and the secret boyfriend without losing control of one role or the other. And that's where the original failure takes shape. By sleeping with Laura, Harry compromises the case and her safety at the same time. He knows the cartel will kill informants. He knows exposure is a death sentence. Yet he keeps her close, keeps her talking, keeps the operation alive. When the traffickers discover the leak, Laura doesn't just die in some random act of violence. She dies in that shipping container because Harry put her there, figuratively and practically, by threading her into his undercover work and refusing to pull her out when the danger escalated. Pattern interrupt, Dexter's origin trauma. It's not just something Harry witnesses, it's something he causes. 3-year-old Dexter sitting in blood, the chainsaw, the plastic. The screaming that never stops in his head, those aren't only the consequences of a cruel world. They are the consequences of Harry's own choices, his own broken plan to control criminals through a woman he was also using for comfort. That's the central question for Harry's psychology from this point on. How do you live with the knowledge that your affair helped orphan a child you then adopt? His guilt over Laura doesn't fade, it mutates. He can't save her, but he can save Dexter. So he builds the code, reframing his failure as a mission. Train the boy. Aim his darkness at other monsters. Turn the orphaned child of his dead lover into the weapon that justifies everything. In this video, we're going to keep tracing that trajectory because this is where Harry's atonement project and Dexter's entire sense of identity fuse. The code becomes less a moral system and more a lifetime apology Harry never says out loud. Every rule, don't get caught, only kill the guilty, leave no trace, is a way of pretending there's control where there was once chaos. But buried under that structure is the secret that would blow it all apart. Harry never tells Dexter about Laura. He never admits that the blood in that container is tied directly to his own undercover work and his own infidelity. For decades, Dexter worships an idealized father who rescued him. When the truth finally surfaces, that image doesn't just crack, it collapses. The code stops being a guiding light and starts looking like a lie built on an affair, a cover-up, and a cop who could never face what he actually did. So when we finally hit season 1, Harry's dead, the affair is buried, and the shipping container is just a recurring nightmare. On the surface, it looks like the mess is over. In reality, Harry has never been more powerful, because now he lives entirely in Dexter's head. Let's kick things off with how the show introduces him. We don't meet Harry as a flawed cop with a failing body and a guilty conscience. We meet him as a calm baritone in Dexter's inner monologue. He appears in soft-lit flashbacks, giving precise instructions, outlining the code like a flawless operating manual. Stalk the target. Confirm the victims. Prepare the kill room. Leave no evidence. The psychology of it is seductive. This is the father as architect, the code as perfect plan. But that Harry is already a construct. In this video, we're going to treat inner Harry less as a ghost and more as a curated memory system. Dexter only recalls the speeches that justify what he's doing now. He edits Harry into the ultimate mentor who understood him completely, who solved his problem, who turned a traumatized child into a controlled instrument of justice. The focus is not just on what Harry actually did, but on how Dexter repackages those moments to keep his lifestyle feeling necessary, even noble. Early on, the world seems to agree. Dexter's kills are efficient. His crime scenes are immaculate. He balances blood spatter analysis by day and ritualistic dismemberment by night, without tripping the investigation at Miami Metro. He dumps bodies in the ocean, keeps his blood slides hidden, and walks through every department briefing as the one man who clearly isn't a suspect. On paper, Harry's design is working. The plan looks airtight. But Season 1 is already lacing that illusion of control with cracks. Dexter's fascination with the ice truck killer is not professional. It's personal, obsessive, almost devotional. Why is a supposedly disciplined predator so entranced by a rival? Why does he feel seen instead of threatened? Inner Harry can't fully explain that. We get moments where the voice in Dexter's head hesitates, disapproves, or warns him away from the case, and Dexter ignores him. The mentor image flickers. The perfect code suddenly looks reactive, unsure, behind the curve. To keep this clear, Season 1 is the first big stress test of Harry's entire design. The past Harry tried to bury literally starts sending blood-soaked breadcrumbs, dismembered bodies posed like artwork, crime scenes that echo the shipping container, a refrigerated truck circling Dexter's life. Brian is weaponizing everything Harry hid, and Dexter's inner Harry can only comment from the sidelines. That's the central question Season 1 quietly plants, if the code is so strong. Why is Dexter drawn to the one killer who keeps dragging him back to the original trauma? Along the way, we start to realize that Harry's posthumous wisdom might just be another layer of the lie. Season 1 sells us the myth of the perfect father engineer, so that when that myth collapses later, we feel the same free fall Dexter does. And the ice truck killer is only the beginning of that collapse. So when the ice truck killer starts staging bodies like art installations, it isn't just a clever villain of the week. It's Harry's buried past, clawing its way back into Dexter's present. From bloodless corpses drained with surgical precision to doll parts left in Dexter's freezer, the investigation feels less like a manhunt and more like a conversation. Someone out there knows Dexter. Someone is tailoring a crime scene directly to his psychology. To keep this clear, the ice truck killer doesn't challenge Dexter's methods first. He challenges Dexter's origin story. Every tableau is a private joke, a body on a beach chair, a severed hand pointing, a crime scene scrubbed of blood, as if mocking Dexter's own compulsion to erase every trace. The central question becomes, how does this stranger understand Dexter so intimately when Dexter believes he is fundamentally unknowable? The answer, of course, is that he isn't a stranger at all. Brian Moser steps out of the shadows as the living embodiment of Harry's original sin. Years before, Harry finds two boys in a shipping container, drowning in their mother's blood. He adopts one, abandons the other, and then lies about the entire event. In that single plan to save Dexter by separating the brothers, Harry creates two trajectories, one child groomed under a code, one left to grow without any containment, two monsters destined to collide. Because Harry never tells Dexter about Laura Moser or Brian, Dexter walks into this collision totally blind. He has no framework to explain why the ice truck killer feels familiar, why the crime scenes feel like memories instead of clues. So when Brian reveals the shared trauma, he isn't just giving Dexter information. He's weaponizing the gap Harry left. He can say, Harry lied to you. I'm the one telling you the truth. And for someone whose entire sense of control rests on Harry's voice in his head. That's a devastating angle of attack. everything crystallizes in the return to the shipping container. Rusted metal, dried blood on the floor, the echo of childhood screams we never heard but can feel. This is the moment Dexter realizes the story Harry told him about his origin is incomplete at best, deliberately falsified at worst. The code of Harry, which always presented itself as a bridge between chaos and order, suddenly looks like a cover-up. If Harry lied about this, what else is built on sand? In this video, we're going to argue that the Ice Truck Killer arc is Harry's first major existential failure made flesh. His attempt to bury the past doesn't just collapse. It returns as a rival mentor who almost convinces Dexter to abandon the code entirely and embrace pure bloodlust with his brother. Brian doesn't want to kill Dexter. He wants to rewrite Dexter's allegiance. And Dexter almost lets him. So what finally pulls Dexter back from choosing Brian over Harry, and how does that choice plant the seeds for an even bigger betrayal later? That choice, Dexter picking Harry's code over Brian's invitation, only works because Harry has already done something far more invasive than training a killer. He's trained a memory. He's turned Dexter's own past into a controlled environment. Let's kick things off with the shipping container, because that's the crime scene Harry never wants fully processed. We see it through quick flashes: blood, plastic, Laura's body, a screaming child. But notice how Harry handles it with young Dexter. There's no real investigation of what happened, no space for grief. No mention that Laura Moser was more than a random victim. Instead, Harry wraps the whole event in a simple story. You were found in blood. You were born with this darkness, and the only plan now is to manage it. To keep this clear, Harry doesn't just omit details. He steers. When Dexter starts asking why he wants to hurt things, Harry reassures him. This is who you are. Not, this is what happened to you. Not, this is trauma. We watch Harry redirect every question away from context and toward identity. The focus is not just on stopping Dexter from remembering the container, it's on stopping him from connecting that memory to any cause that might challenge the code. Think about the pattern. Young Dexter kills animals. Harry doesn't say, "You're reacting to something horrific you survived." He says, "You have a need. We'll give it rules." Short sentence. Short sentence. Lifelong consequence. By naming the urge as innate and permanent, Harry locks Dexter into a fixed self-concept. Monster first, victim never. And once that frame is in place, Dexter becomes dependent on Harry's narrative. If the central question is, what's wrong with me? Harry's answer is, you were made this way, and only my code keeps you from total collapse. So why would Dexter ever seek therapy? Why look for alternative explanations, or healing, or even moral frameworks beyond Harry's voice in his head? The psychology is brutally efficient. If the only thing standing between you and chaos is the man who found you, you cling to him. That's why the season 1 reveal hits like a second crime scene. When Dexter's memories resurface and he realizes Laura wasn't just a body, but Harry's informant, his lover, his mother, Harry's story doesn't just crack, it implodes. Harry wasn't merely mistaken about the origin of Dexter's darkness, he was actively editing the file. The cop who should have championed truth turned evidence tampering into parenting. Along the way, Harry's attempt to control Dexter's self-understanding looks like a relational success. Dexter is loyal, obedient, grateful, but existentially, it's a failure baked into the code itself. Once the real memories push through, that curated childhood becomes proof not of love, but of manipulation. Harry keeps Dexter close in the short term, yet guarantees that when the full story finally surfaces, the rupture won't just be emotional, it will threaten the entire structure of the code. And that's the next collapse we have to track. What happens when Dexter realizes the man who defined his reality was also the one who couldn't live with what he'd created. We cut from the abstract revelation about Harry's lies to the most concrete image possible: a fluorescent hospital room, the stink of antiseptic, and a father following his son down a hallway, thinking he's still in control. Harry isn't expecting horror. He's expecting oversight. In his mind, this is just another training run, another chance to fine-tune the code, to keep the plan on track. He's sick, exhausted, but he still believes in the framework he built: stalk, confirm, prepare, eliminate. To keep this clear, Harry walks into that storage space not as a terrified parent, but as a cop architect checking the structure he designed. What he finds detonates that illusion in a single glance. Dexter is already in motion, plastic hung, tools laid out, a body on the table half open. No hesitation, no visible thrill, just a teenager working through dismemberment with the calm, methodical rhythm of someone doing homework. From a distance, Harry watches his son wipe the knife, reposition a limb, adjust the saw. This is not a child managing urges. This is a fully operational predator. In this video, we're going to keep returning to that gap between intention and outcome, and this is the primal version of it. Harry thought he'd built a safety harness. In front of him is an instruction manual being followed line by line. The psychological shock is layered. First, the visceral, the blood, the smell, the sound of bone. Then, the cognitive whiplash, as years of rationalization collapse in seconds. Every lesson he drilled, how to choose victims, how to avoid investigation, how to leave no trace, replays in his mind. But now, it's stripped of the fantasy that Dexter is different from the men Harry hunts. The central question hits him like a physical blow. What's the actual difference between this table and any crime scene he spent his life documenting? There isn't one. The code doesn't look like a moral barrier anymore. It looks like a syllabus. And this is where Harry's body and conscience sync up in failure. He's already ill, already carrying the buried guilt of Laura Moser, of using her son as a weapon to fix a broken system he couldn't reform as a cop. Along the way, he's told himself that the consequences are worth it, that channeling Dexter is better than locking him away. But in that room, with his heart literally failing and his worldview disintegrating, he finally sees the full trajectory. He didn't divert a monster. He built one. Each major section will keep tracking these moments where control is revealed as delusion, but this is the original prototype. Harry staggers out, stunned, unable to speak, because he can't imagine a plan that unteaches what he's already taught. We leave him there for now, a man in a hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, realizing he can't live with what he's put into the world. And having no idea how to take it back, Harry doesn't take it back. He checks out. In the official story Dexter carries for decades, Harry dies of heart disease, the tragic but natural end to a good cop who did his best. It's clean, it's comforting, it keeps the plan intact. But canon gives us a different image. Harry in that same hospital, overwhelmed after walking in on teenage Dexter dismembering a body, swallowing a bottle of pills because he can't live with what he set in motion. That's not a noble sacrifice. That's an exit. To keep this clear, we need to separate what Dexter believes from what actually happens. Dexter grows up thinking Harry fought his illness as long as he could, that the code was his final gift. A moral compass passed down by a dying father. In reality, the man who built that system sees one of its successes in action and immediately chooses death over responsibility. He doesn't stay to adjust the rules. He doesn't warn Deb. He doesn't turn Dexter in or even seek real psychological help. He just leaves. And the way he leaves matters. He doesn't die in the line of duty. He doesn't collapse during an investigation. He kills himself in a hospital bed, quietly, after confronting the horror of his own experiment. That choice is less about protecting Dexter and more about escaping Dexter, escaping the unbearable realization that he has weaponized his adopted son and can't bear to look at the results. Harry chooses relief over repair. What does that do to Dexter's psychology? It strands him. He's left alone with a lethal skill set, a rigid code, and no adult in the room who actually believes in it enough to live with its consequences. Harry's absence becomes the condition that makes the inner voice Harry possible. Without the flawed, guilty, visibly shaken man present, Dexter can idealize him. He turns Harry into a calm mentor in his head, a sanitized, almost holy figure who always approves, always knows, always justifies. In this video, we're going to keep tracking that gap between the real Harry and the imaginary one, because the focus is not just on what Dexter does, but on who he thinks is watching. When the only Harry left is the one in Dexter's mind, there's no one to say. This is a failure. There's only a projected authority that rubber stamps whatever the dark passenger already wants. On an existential level, this is the purest collapse. The architect of the code doesn't stay to see if it works. He abandons the experiment at the most critical phase, right as Dexter starts killing for real, guaranteeing uncontrolled outcomes. The central question becomes devastating. If the man who designed your entire moral system chose death the first time he saw it applied, what does that say about the system? Along the way, the series lets that question sit in the background until the later seasons rip the curtain down. When Dexter finally learns Harry's death was suicide, it doesn't just hurt. It detonates the moral authority of the code itself. If Harry couldn't live with Harry's code, why should Dexter? And when that realization finally lands, it doesn't just threaten Dexter's sense of control, it threatens everyone still trying to live inside the lie he built from it. Because the moment Dexter understands why Harry really died is the moment the code stops being protection and starts looking like something much darker. And the next time he breaks it, the fallout won't be theoretical. And Season 2 answers that threat by doing the one thing Harry never prepared Dexter for. It digs everything up. We open on the ocean turning against him. Divers descend, cameras flash, and Dexter's tidy underwater graveyard erupts onto the news as the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation. All those bodies Harry taught him to disappear, now they're tagged, cataloged, and fed into an FBI database. The manhunt isn't just for a serial killer. It's for the practical legacy of Harry's entire plan. To keep this clear, this is the first time the code faces real institutional pressure. Not a cop with good instincts, not a single close call, a full federal task force, pattern analysis, and a media narrative that treats the butcher as a system in his own right. And under that spotlight, we start seeing the operational failures Harry never even imagined. Harry optimized Dexter for the Miami of his day, lazy record keeping, limited forensics, a department he could quietly influence. He never planned for mass body discovery. He never accounted for sonar sweeps, ocean currents, and long-term forensic advances that could pull decades of kills into one coherent story. What looked like perfect control, blood slides, consistent dumping grounds, ritualized methods, suddenly reads as a dataset. A pattern any decent investigation can follow. Inner voice, Harry reacts the only way he knows how, by doubling down on rules that no longer fit the scale of the problem. He scolds Dexter for taking trophies, for getting sloppy, for letting the bodies pile up. Then he pivots, advising him on how to destroy slides, how to ride out the storm, how to stay one step ahead. But listen closely, and we hear the gap. Even Harry's posthumous guidance doesn't have a contingency for this level of exposure. What do you do when the entire ocean is a crime scene? This is where the central question of the season shifts. It's no longer can Dexter follow the code? It becomes what happens when the code is not enough. And the answer arrives in Dexter's improvisations. He frames Dokes. He manipulates evidence, steers the investigation, and weaponizes his forensic access, not to enact Harry's ethics, but to manufacture a scapegoat. Once the system is stressed, Dexter isn't following Harry's rules. He's rewriting them in real time. Pattern interrupt. If Harry's design was so flawed, why does Dexter survive the season at all? Because the focus is not just on failure, it's on how failure teaches him the wrong lesson. Leela blows up the cabin and conveniently erases Dokes. The case collapses. Dexter walks away convinced that his adaptability proves the code still works, when what he's really proven is that he'll sacrifice anyone to preserve the illusion of control. Season 2 is the moment the code stops looking like a flawless design and starts looking brittle, reactive, and dangerously incomplete. And once Dexter learns he can outmaneuver an entire task force, the next logical step is inevitable. He starts training other people in a system that's already breaking. Season 2 doesn't just prove Dexter can beat an investigation. It proves he has no idea what to do with freedom. The minute the Bay Harbor Butcher case collapses and he walks away clean, he reaches for something Harry never planned for, a relationship that doesn't demand he hide the monster. Enter Lila, an arsonist, an addict, an artist of chaos who looks at Dexter's darkness and says, essentially, more. Where Rita represents Harry's model of control, routine, family, the mask, Lila offers the opposite plan. No code, no secrecy, no shame. She doesn't ask him to fake normal. She invites him to live as the thing Harry trained him to bury. To keep this clear, Harry's entire design is technical. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room. He teaches Dexter how to clean blood, how to dodge cameras, how to pass a psych evaluation with stock phrases about grief and empathy. What he never teaches is how to handle someone who sees through the act and doesn't run. That's the blind spot Leela drives a truck through. Psychology matters here. Dexter's emotional life has been kept in a kill room of its own. Harry spends years telling him he can't really feel, then drills in a script for how love and attachment are supposed to look. Smile at Rita, bring donuts, remember birthdays. It's all mimicry. So, when Leela responds to his confession about the code with fascination instead of horror, when she eroticizes his damage and turns his darkness into intimacy, Dexter has no framework to evaluate what's happening. Is this love? Is this acceptance? Or is this just another form of control? Inner voice, Harry reacts instantly. He warns Dexter. He calls Lila dangerous, unstable, a threat to the plan. And he's right. But that's the problem. He's only a siren, not a skill set. He can shout no in Dexter's head, yet he never gave Dexter the tools to understand why someone like Leela is so intoxicating, or how trauma, addiction, and validation can fuse into a psychological pull that feels like destiny. The central question becomes, what good is a code that can spot a bad target, but not a bad attachment? Leela exposes the relational failure baked into Harry's system. Because Harry taught Dexter to fake normal love, the first time someone offers him a version of love that aligns with his so-called true self, he treats it as more authentic by default. Leela burns her sponsor's house, stalks Rita, kills Dokes to save Dexter, and he still hesitates. Why? Because the mask Harry built never taught him that love can be predatory, that chaos can masquerade as liberation. Along the way, we see the long-term consequences. Every time Dexter reaches for connection, Leela, Miguel, Lumen, Hannah, he's operating outside Harry's design. improvising in real time. That gap between technical control and emotional ignorance is where the series' worst collateral damage erupts. And Leela is our first clear signal that the next phase of Dexter's trajectory will be defined less by clean kills and more by the people he pulls into the blast radius. And that blast radius doesn't just hit lovers and procs, it slams straight into the one person in Miami Metro who refuses to be hypnotized by Dexter's performance, Sergeant James Dokes. From the first glare across the bullpen to that growled "I'm watching you," Dokes is a different kind of threat. He's not the methodical CSI, not the patient investigator building an airtight case. He's a predator, reading another predator. Short temper, fast instincts, zero interest in Dexter's carefully curated mask, for a man whose entire plan depends on procedural blind spots and polite distance. That is lethal. To keep this clear, Harry's code is built on a specific assumption about the system. Investigators are rational, they need evidence, they follow rules. So Dexter can manipulate reports, steer the investigation, and as long as no one finds a body or a slide, he's safe. The central question Harry never really entertains is, what happens if someone just knows? What if the threat isn't a DA with a warrant, but a colleague who trusts his gut more than the paperwork? Dokes is that glitch in the design. He doesn't wait for proof. He clocks Dexter's flat affect at crime scenes, the way he's a little too comfortable around mutilated bodies, the way his story never quite feels human. Season by season, the pressure escalates. Dokes follows him to crime scenes he shouldn't be at. He confronts him in parking lots. He breaks into Dexter's apartment and finds the blood slides, that private trophy system Harry never anticipated anyone touching. Suddenly, Dexter is improvising far outside Harry's operational guidelines. No clean stock confirmed kill pattern, no controlled environment. To shake Dokes, he fakes drug use, stages a breakdown, even submits to rehab. Each move is a desperate patch on a code that never accounted for an honest cop with nothing to lose. When Dokes finally corners him in the Everglades, locking him in that cage. The investigation Dexter thought he controlled has completely inverted. He's the one under observation now. And here comes the moral collapse. The focus is not just on logistics, but on consequences. Dokes is the rare thing in this world, an actually principled cop who refuses to look away. He's right about Dexter. He's punished for it. Leela blows up the cabin, frames him as the Bay Harbor butcher, and Dexter lets it stand. Harry's experiment, sold to a child as only the guilty, now requires the death and posthumous condemnation of an innocent man to stay intact. That's not a safeguard. That's a lie. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this pivot. Dokes' death is where the code stops merely failing to protect innocents and starts actively demanding their sacrifice. If the only way Dexter's system survives is by feeding someone like Dokes into the fire, what does that say about Harry's legacy? And who's next on the altar when the investigation closes in again? And the next time the investigation circles back. Dexter doesn't just feed someone to the fire. He tries to share it. Season 3 drops Miguel Prado into that vacuum left by Dokes and Leela, a charismatic, high-profile prosecutor who is just as disillusioned with the system as Harry ever was. In court, Miguel is the picture of control, the righteous state hammer. Behind closed doors, he's watching criminals walk on technicalities, feeling the same rage Harry felt in those early Miami days. The difference is, Harry built a code. Miguel wants results. Let's kick things off with the bar fight that shouldn't have mattered. Dexter kills Oscar Prado, thinks it's a routine cleanup, and instead triggers a political and emotional earthquake. Miguel's grief becomes the opening. He's drawn to the idea that someone out there is doing what he wishes he could, bypassing the entire legal process and making the consequences feel immediate. From that point on, the season's trajectory is simple and deadly. A prosecutor and a serial killer both decide the system has failed, and both reach for off-the-books justice. Dexter, craving connection after burning through Brian, Dokes, and Lila, makes the most dangerous plan of his life. He decides to become Harry. He walks Miguel through the psychology of a righteous kill, hints at a structure, starts talking about rules and evidence, and only targeting those who slip through the cracks. To keep this clear, he's not just confiding, he's mentoring. He's testing whether the code can finally function as a bridge instead of a cage. But the central question hits fast. What happens when someone without Harry's specific anxieties about guilt and exposure gets their hands on this philosophy? Miguel answers by twisting the code almost immediately. He fixates on Ellen Wolf, a defense attorney who humiliates him in court. There's no rigorous investigation, no careful vetting of victims, just wounded pride dressed up as moral outrage. Miguel uses Dexter's language about monsters and justice to justify a personal vendetta, turning an already fragile system into a pure instrument of ego. This is where Harry's original hubris is exposed in full. If an adult, forensically trained Dexter, with years of practice and near misses, can't keep his own student inside the lines, what does that say about Harry's belief that he could implant this framework in a traumatized child and have it hold? Harry thought the code could override raw impulse. Miguel proves it can just as easily amplify it. Along the way, the focus is not just on Miguel's escalation, but on Dexter, watching his own doctrine leave his head and enter someone less disciplined. Each major section will circle this pattern. Dexter sets a boundary, Miguel crosses it, the kill room logic collapses. By the time Dexter realizes he has to put Miguel on his table, he's staring into a mirror. Miguel is what happens when Harry's grand experiment stops being theoretical and starts spreading. And if one apprentice can go this wrong, how stable was the system ever going to be when family, children, or new partners enter the picture next? Miguel is what happens when Harry's lesson plan escapes the classroom and starts talking back. Suddenly, Dexter doesn't just have a code in his head, he has competing ghosts arguing over what his darkness is for. And the more Miguel celebrates that darkness, the weaker Harry's voice starts to sound. Let's kick things off with the investigation phase of that psychic turf war. Inner voice Harry is suspicious of Miguel almost immediately. We see him in the passenger seat, warning Dexter that Miguel's attention is dangerous, that getting close to a high-profile Ada is a failure of basic operational control. He tells Dexter not to reveal himself, not to share the ritual, not to trust. Dexter hears him. Dexter nods. Then Dexter brings Miguel to a kill room anyway. From Harry standing in the shadows of Freebo's house, insisting this is a mistake, to Harry literally on the edge of the table as Miguel watches his first sanctioned execution, the pattern is clear. Harry keeps saying no. Dexter keeps treating that no as negotiable. These are not rare exceptions in Dexter's life. These are the rule. The man who wants to find every move now has to compete with the thrill of finally being seen. Because Miguel offers something Harry never did. Harry gave Dexter rules, shame, and the constant reminder that he was dangerous. Miguel gives him a warped kind of love. Miguel doesn't just tolerate the dark passenger, he toasts it. He praises Dexter's kills, hugs him after murders, calls him a partner instead of a problem. The focus is not just on Miguel as a corrupt student, but on the psychology of what it means for Dexter to hear, for the first time, that his true self is worthy of celebration. This sets up the central question of Season 3. For Dexter's inner world, is he a weapon that must be restrained? Or a righteous force that deserves applause? Harry's voice is all restraint, all contingency plans and cleanup protocols. Miguel's voice is liberation, a fantasy of power without consequences. To keep this clear, every scene with both ghosts in Dexter's head is a tug of war between control and validation. Do you listen to the father who says you're broken, or the friend who says you're perfect? When Miguel starts breaking the code, going after Ellen Wolf, twisting the victim criteria for personal grudges, Dexter feels that collapse in real time. Harry's ghost returns with "I told you so" fury, but Dexter doesn't choose Harry's model because he suddenly believes in the ethics. He chooses it because Miguel's chaos threatens exposure, family, and the fragile illusion that Dexter is still running the investigation into his own life. Killing Miguel is crisis management, not a moral awakening. And that's the unsettling residue. Once we've watched Dexter override Harry's warnings, enjoy Miguel's validation, and then retreat back to the code only when the walls close in, we can't unsee how conditional his loyalty really is. If Harry's authority can be sidelined once, what happens when Rita, the kids, and later, Harrison raise stakes Harry never planned for? Along the way, we're left wondering, when the next ghost shows up, which voice will Dexter betray first? And that's exactly where Season 4 detonates the fantasy Harry built. Dexter isn't just a shadow in Miami anymore. He's a husband in the suburbs, a stepfather packing school lunches, a forensic analyst at Miami Metro, and a serial killer trying to keep the ritual alive while Rita is pregnant with his biological son. 4 identities. One man who still thinks control is his defining trait. On paper, it looks like a successful plan. He's domesticated the monster. The house in the cul-de-sac, the backyard barbecue, the baby furniture stacked next to his hidden blood slide box. But Harry's code was never designed for this. It was written for a lone predator who could disappear at night, return before dawn, and never have to explain why he missed dinner, a recital, or a Lamaze class. The central question in this season becomes brutally simple. What happens when a code built for isolation collides with people who expect intimacy? Rita wants honesty, not cover stories about late nights in the lab. Astor and Cody need emotional presence, not a blank father figure rehearsing fake smiles Harry taught him as a kid. In-laws watch him, neighbors observe him. The social fabric of suburbia becomes its own investigation. Every lie has witnesses now. To keep this clear, we can track it through inner voice Harry. Whenever Dexter leans into family life, that ghost tightens the leash. When Dexter tries to attend childbirth classes or fix the plumbing instead of stalking, Harry scoffs that he's losing focus. When Dexter imagines actually loving Rita, Harry appears in the passenger seat to remind him he's different, that this is a costume, that real attachment is a liability. The psychology here is vicious. The one person Dexter trusts most is also the one insisting he can't be fully human. We watch the consequences pile up. Dexter falls asleep at the wheel after a night kill and crashes the car, literally smashing his plan to balance it all. He misses key investigation beats at Miami Metro because he's juggling diapers and death. Rita's suspicions grow. Every domestic promise he makes becomes another appointment the dark passenger forces him to break. This isn't just operational failure, it's relational collapse, engineered by a code that never imagined bedtime stories. And that's the tragedy buried under Harry's guidance. By convincing Dexter he's incapable of genuine feeling, Harry leaves him unequipped to navigate the very family life he accidentally builds. Dexter can collect evidence, clean a crime scene, anticipate police procedure. He cannot read his wife's fear, his stepkid's resentment, or his own attachment to the child on the ultrasound. In this video, we're going to see how the show answers that blind spot with a monster of its own. Enter Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer, a church-going family man, a devoted husband and father, and a prolific murderer. He is the dark mirror of what a killer with a family can become, the living answer to a question Harry never allowed himself to ask. If the code meets real attachment and loses what exactly is left of Dexter Morgan, Arthur Mitchell looks like the dream Harry sold Dexter. Sunday school teacher, church deacon, a man who builds houses for the needy and sings hymns with his arm around his family. Then we cut to the other life, the hammer, the bathtub, the rooftop. 30 years of ritualized murder running parallel to TA meetings and Thanksgiving dinners. On the surface, Trinity is what Harry promised the code could engineer, a predator seamlessly camouflaged inside a respectable domestic shell, using routine, ritual, and planning to stay ahead of any investigation. To keep this clear, Arthur has everything Harry told Dexter to want: a wife who believes, children under his roof, a stable identity that makes him invisible to suspicion. But where Dexter thinks this looks like balance, we're actually watching a slow-motion collapse stretched across decades. When Dexter first tracks Arthur, he isn't horrified. He's intrigued. Here is a serial killer who has done what Dexter is only beginning to attempt in Season 4, maintain a family and a kill schedule without obvious exposure. Dexter studies Arthur's patterns the way he once studied Harry's rules. How does he pick victims, vanish evidence, come home in time for dinner? In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that gap between what Dexter thinks he's learning and what is actually happening in front of him. Because Harry's worst fear is walking around in Arthur's skin. Harry always knew that once you authorize murder, the line between weapon for justice and terror in the living room is paper thin. Trinity is that nightmare realized. His family isn't protected by rules, they are collateral held hostage by them. Every lesson is enforced with intimidation. Every secret is preserved with violence. The code's central promise of control, kill the right people, keep everyone safe, crumbles the second we see the bruises on his son and the terror in his daughter's eyes. In her voice, Harry reacts before Dexter does. He's alarmed, frantic, insisting that this is not a model but a warning. Yet Dexter keeps asking the central question Harry never wanted on the table. If Arthur can keep killing and keep his family, why can't I? That is the precise moment the code stops being a safeguard and becomes a fantasy blueprint. Then the pattern interrupt hits. We go inside the Mitchell home. The smiling wife, locked in a marriage of fear. Jonah, beaten and berated. Rebecca, suffocated by surveillance. The supposed balance is revealed as a lie, a domestic crime scene that never gets processed. Trying to graft murder onto family life doesn't stabilize Arthur, it poisons every room he walks into. Along the way, we realize Harry's experiment was always chasing an illusion. Trinity is the living proof that a controlled killer with a safe family is impossible. The only question is how long it takes the consequences to surface. And by the time Dexter sees that truth, he's already closer to Arthur Mitchell, in secrecy, in self-justification, in the damage radiating from his plans, than Harry would ever admit. And then, the illusion finally sends a bill Dexter can't pay. Trinity isn't just the proof that Harry's model has a twin. He's the man who walks straight through the code's supposed perimeter and into Dexter's living room. Dexter tracks Arthur, dismantles his rituals, and stages what he thinks is the perfect corrective ending. Plastic, confession, knife. The monster is neutralized. The family is safe. The plan worked. He drives home expecting a season reset. Rita, the kids, Harrison. The fragile fantasy of control restored by one more righteous kill. Instead, we cut to the bathroom. Water in the tub, blood on the tiles. Rita's body, pale and still, wrists opened the way Trinity opened his other victims, and on the floor, Harrison crying, sitting in a pool of his mother's blood. The image is an exact echo of Dexter's own origin. The shipping container rewritten in suburban lighting. In that instant, the central question of the entire series slams into focus. What did all of this killing actually protect? To keep this clear, Harry's Code was always sold as a bargain with fate. If Dexter followed the rules, only the guilty, no evidence, never get caught, then the monsters would be on his table, not at his door. Rita's murder annihilates that justification in one shot. Dexter did everything right with Trinity by his own twisted metrics. Long investigation, careful stalking, multiple chances to walk away. He still brought Arthur Mitchell into his family's orbit. He still underestimated the long-term risk of letting a serial killer know his real name, his workplace, his wife. That's Harry's blind spot made flesh. Harry trained Dexter to avoid police suspicion, not to protect anyone else from the fallout of his double life. He drilled crime scene awareness, alibis, and body disposal, but never once taught Dexter how to weigh, if I play cat and mouse with this man, will he find my children? The focus is not just on a tactical failure, it's on a psychological absence. There is no chapter in the Code for What if the killer comes after the people you love, because Harry never imagined Dexter as a husband and father whose secret hobby could invite retaliation. Notice who isn't there in that bathroom. Inner Voice Harry doesn't offer a rule, a rationalization, or even a reprimand. The ghost cop, who always had a line, a warning, a way to reassert control, is silent, because the Code has no defense against this category of consequence. Trinity doesn't expose Dexter to the law. He exposes Dexter to himself. And in that silence, the experiment fails in the most brutal way possible. Harrison becomes the new child in the blood, the next generation stamped with a trauma Harry believed he was containing. Along the way, every safeguard Harry engineered has not only collapsed, it has looped back and recreated the very origin story it was meant to erase. Rita's death isn't just Dexter's worst personal loss. It's the moment Harry's grand design stops being a tragic miscalculation and becomes a self-replicating curse. The question now is how Dexter lives with that curse, and who he decides has to pay for it next. Rita's blood is barely dry when Season 5 hands Dexter something Harry's Code never prepared him for, a victim who refuses to stay a victim. Lumen isn't a puzzle Dexter solves and files away. She's a living, shaking reminder that the Bay Harbor butcher isn't the only one whose life was shattered by men who never faced consequences. Let's kick things off with the image that breaks the pattern. Instead of Dexter stalking a target, he finds Lumen cowering in a locked room, bruised, terrified, and very much alive. The central question isn't, does this person deserve to die? It's, what does justice look like when the survivor wants blood as badly as he does? Harry's plan was built on a clean binary, predator and prey, monster and innocent. Lumen walks straight through that line. To keep this clear, Harry's Code has no clause for deputizing a traumatized civilian. Lumen didn't kill anyone. She doesn't meet the ritual checklist Dexter recites in his head. Yet when she names the men who tortured her, when she shakes and still insists on being in the room when they die, Dexter doesn't walk away. He builds her a kill room. He trains her to stab. He hands over control of the knife. On paper, that's a total Code failure. In practice, it exposes what the Code always secretly was, a flexible narrative Dexter uses to organize his urges and his guilt. With Lumen, we watch him bend the rules in real time. He forges evidence to justify targets, rushes the investigation to match her trauma timeline, and lets her presence override his usual caution. The focus is not just on who ends up on the table, but on how Dexter is suddenly willing to risk exposure for someone else's closure. Inner voice Harry hates this. The spectral mentor, who once walked Dexter through animal killings and crime scene cleanup, flickers in and out, warning, scolding, insisting that Lumen is a liability, that partners lead to collapse. Harry can't process what's actually happening. Dexter isn't just protecting a secret. He's trying to repair a person. It's not the dark passenger driving this partnership. It's emerging empathy. Along the way, the show quietly rewires Dexter's psychology. He lies to protect Lumen, not just himself. He adjusts the code language in his head, our victims, our mission, like he's retrofitting Harry's voice to bless something it was never designed to cover. Every time he chooses her pain over his protocols, we see him stepping away from the identity Harry scripted, the isolated weapon, the controlled executioner, the man who doesn't truly feel. And when Lumen's need for revenge is finally satisfied and she leaves, Dexter is left alone with a deeper problem than exposure. If he can kill for compassion, not just compulsion, what else might he be capable of? And who will be the next person to test how far he's willing to go beyond the code? Season 6 takes that question and throws it into a burning church. Instead of another accomplice in vengeance, Dexter meets someone Harry never prepared him for, a killer who found faith and refused to stay a monster. Brother Sam is not a fantasy of control. He's a former gang member, a man with bodies on his conscience, who now runs an auto shop and a small congregation, offering ex-cons work, grace, and a way out. When Dexter first investigates him, the plan is simple. Confirm he's still dangerous, apply the code, move on. But Sam's life doesn't fit Harry's categories. He admits his past. He owns his violence. He talks about being changed, not managed. To keep this clear, Harry's code is aggressively secular. No soul, no redemption, no larger investigation into meaning. Dexter is a monster, the world is a hunting ground, and the code is just a set of procedures to minimize risk and maximize utility. Stalk the target. Confirm the victims. Prepare the kill room. Leave no evidence. It's logistics, not theology. The central question, for Harry, was never who can Dexter become. It was only how do we keep this under control? Brother Sam answers a different question. He tells Dexter that darkness is real, but so is light, and that people can choose which one to feed. When Sam is shot and dying, Dexter expects hatred. Instead, Sam begs him to forgive the shooter. That single request is a pattern interrupt, not just for Dexter, but for the entire code. If a man with a real body count can genuinely change direction, what does that say about the identity Harry nailed to Dexter's psyche in childhood? Inner voice, Harry fights back hard. Every time Dexter feels pulled toward mercy or transformation, that ghost leans in with the old script. This is what you are. This is why we made the code. This is the only way your life makes sense. We're watching a psychological turf war. On one side, Sam's language of choice, faith, and responsibility. On the other, Harry's cold determinism. You were born in blood. Therefore, you will always be this. And here's the existential failure buried inside that conflict. If Dexter can grow, feel, forgive, and choose differently, then Harry's entire premise collapses. The code wasn't a tragic necessity. It was a catastrophic misreading of a traumatized child. What happens to Dexter's whole moral architecture when he realizes the monster might have been a scared boy who never got another framework? In this video, we're going to keep tracing that shift, because Brother Sam is not an isolated detour. The more Dexter experiments with alternative moral systems, faith with Sam, family with Harrison, even a warped justice with Travis Marshall, the weaker Harry's grip becomes. And the weaker that grip, the more dangerous the next revelation will be. Especially when Debra finally steps into the truth Harry spent a lifetime hiding from her, and that next revelation doesn't wait. It walks straight through a church doorway and finds Dexter with a knife in his hand. Debra stepping into the doomsday kill room is the moment Harry's entire family plan collapses in a single continuous shot. Plastic everywhere. Travis Marshall shrink-wrapped to the altar. Dexter frozen mid-stab, framed in the very ritual Harry spent years teaching him to perfect. We've seen this tableau dozens of times from Dexter's perspective. This is the first time we're forced to see it through Deborah's eyes. To keep this clear, Harry's strategy only works if Deborah never sees this image. He designs a split household, one child trained as a weapon, the other trained as a badge. Dexter gets the code, the psychology lessons, the clandestine field trips to crime scenes. Debra gets the bedtime stories about justice, the encouragement to join the academy, the faith that her father is a good cop in a broken system. The entire plan rests on control through separation. These worlds are never supposed to touch. Season 7 is what happens when they collide head-on. Deborah's first reaction isn't just horror at the blood, it's disorientation. She's the lieutenant of Miami Metro, the person who should be leading the investigation into this exact crime scene, and instead she's standing in the middle of it, realizing her own brother is the cause. The central question slams into her. How long has this been going on? And how many times did Harry choose Dexter over the law he preached to her? As Dexter walks her through the code, we watch the retroactive devastation set in. Every childhood memory is refiled as evidence. Those late-night drives with Harry, she was excluded from. The way Harry pushed Dexter toward forensics while nudging her toward patrol. The fact that her father, the man who told her to trust the system, was secretly bypassing that system through his son. She isn't just betrayed as a sister. She's drafted as an accessory. This is where Inner Voice Harry becomes actively cruel. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to how Dexter's hallucinated Harry reveals the damage the real Harry did, and nowhere is that clearer than in Debra's breakdowns. Dexter imagines Harry standing in the room as Debra shakes, as she vomits, as she begs Dexter to stop. Harry's face is pained, but he doesn't intervene. It's the perfect visual metaphor, the man who engineered this dynamic watching its consequences unfold, powerless because the real choices were made decades ago. Along the way, Dexter's illusion that the code protects his family evaporates. Deborah's knowledge doesn't bind them closer, it weaponizes every interaction. She covers up the church scene, lies to her own detectives, and ultimately guns down Lagerta in a shipping container to preserve the secret Harry built. The focus is not just on a plan failing operationally. It's a relational failure so total that the family Harry thought he was saving only exists now as a shared crime scene. From this point on, there is no innocent Morgan left to protect. There is only wreckage Harry refused to face when it might have changed their trajectory. Lagerta's body on that concrete floor is not just the end of a detective. It's the moment the system Harry tried to outmaneuver reaches through time and puts its hands around his legacy. From the start of Season 7, Lagerta's plan is brutally simple. Reopen the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation. Follow the evidence Dokes never got to finish. No code, no dark passenger, just procedure. When she finds Dexter's old blood slide at the church where Travis Marshall died, we watch the past literally surface in her hand. Harry's perfect ritual, the trophies he drilled into Dexter's psychology, become the breadcrumb trail that resurrects the case. To keep this clear, Lagerta isn't guessing. She's investigating. She pulls Dokes' files. She notices the pattern of Dexter near key crime scenes. She questions his convenient heroics, his proximity to Lila's fire, his connection to Rita's death, and even his relationship with Debra. The central question for her is simple. How many coincidences add up to a killer. For us, it's harsher. What happens when Harry's private justice project runs into a public servant who actually believes in the law? Harry's code was built on the illusion of control. Vet the target, isolate the scene, erase the evidence. For years, that works, until a determined investigator starts connecting old cases, personal relationships, and procedural anomalies. LaGuerta sees Deborah pulling Dexter out of a fire that should have exposed him. She sees Deborah manipulating reports. She sees the Miami Metro machinery bending around one forensic analyst. The safeguards Harry trusted collapse the second someone asks, why is this man always at the center? And that pressure doesn't just corner Dexter. It breaks Deborah. Along the way, we've watched her as the honest cop, the one Harry supposedly got right. But LaGuerta's hunt forces a choice Harry never prepared her for: protect the institution she serves, or protect the brother she loves. In that shipping container, with LaGuerta begging her to do the right thing, Deborah's entire moral framework implodes. She shoots LaGuerta. She chooses Dexter over the badge. This is the act that would have horrified the idealized Harry living in Dexter's head. The man who preached the code as a shield for Deborah's innocence ends up, indirectly, putting the gun in her hand. LaGuerta, one of the few genuinely principled voices in that department, dies not because the justice system failed, but because Harry refused to trust it and built his own weapon instead. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that inversion. Harry thought he was fixing a broken process from the outside. Instead, his experiment corrupts the inside. It turns his daughter into a killer to protect the son he trained. It silences the very investigator who might have exposed the rot cleanly. And the cruel twist is, LaGuerta was right. So if the system finally had the truth in its hands and still lost, what exactly is left for Dexter to hide behind in the next phase of his trajectory? So when LaGuerta dies with the truth on her lips, we hit a wall. The code has failed in court, in family, in the investigation. Where do you go after that kind of collapse? Season 8 answers with a pattern interrupt Harry never prepared us for: a stranger who claims she helped write the code in the first place. Enter Dr. Evelyn Vogel, a calm, precise neuroscientist who looks at brain scans the way Dexter looks at blood spatter. She tells Dexter, and by extension us, that Harry didn't build this system alone. He came to her with a problem: a boy with violent impulses, a cop's fear of consequences, and a desperate plan to regain control. To keep this clear, Harry didn't seek a therapist for Dexter. He sought an architect. Vogel walks us through it clinically. Harry brought her case files, childhood incidents, escalating signs of psychopathy. Together, they drafted rules, scenarios, contingencies. Where Harry framed the code as a father's last resort, Vogel frames it as a co-authored protocol, an experiment in managed violence. The central question stops being, how far will a father go to save his son? And becomes, how far will two adults go to make use of a child they believe is beyond saving? For Vogel, Dexter isn't a son at all. He's a success story. She calls him her perfect psychopath, the living proof that her theories about channeling predatory urges can work in the real world. From a hallway conversation about childhood tests to that chilling pride in her voice when she praises his rituals, every interaction reduces Dexter to data. Harry's late-night lessons in the car. The careful talk about only killing those who deserve it, under Vogel's light, they stop looking like love and start looking like lab work. And that reframes everything. The code is no longer a personal creed born from guilt and fear. It's a clinical framework designed to weaponize Dexter's psychology in a controlled direction. What Dexter clung to as a moral compass was, at origin, a project plan, a set of levers and safeguards meant to keep the experiment running without public exposure. Is it any surprise that when the real world pushes back, Brian, Dokes, LaGuardia, the structure can't hold. Notice what happens to inner voice Harry in this season. As Vogel steps in, the ghost in Dexter's head fades to the background, interrupted, corrected, sometimes outright contradicted. The myth of Harry as solitary architect, the man whose wisdom Dexter quotes like scripture, is pushed aside by a colder author who remembers the first draft. The focus is not just on the new mentor, it's on watching an old story lose its grip. And if Harry needed Vogel at the very beginning, it means he always knew he was out of his depth. Faced with a child he didn't understand, he chose collaboration with a neuroscientist over genuine treatment, experimentation over healing. That choice will haunt the next phase of Dexter's trajectory, because once the code is exposed as a designed system, we have to ask, what happens when its designers lose control of their own creation? Once Vogel is on the board, Harry stops being a distant, noble ghost and starts looking a lot more like a man running a long, desperate experiment. And that's where the ugliest truth surfaces. The experiment didn't start with Dexter. It started with Laura Moser. Let's kick things off with the reveal that shatters Dexter's last illusion of control. Through the late series' investigation into his past, Dexter discovers that Harry wasn't just the heroic cop who found a traumatized child in a shipping container. He was already entangled with Dexter's biological mother, Laura, sleeping with her while using her as a confidential informant in his undercover work against drug traffickers. The central question becomes unavoidable. Was Laura a victim Harry failed to protect, or collateral damage in a plan he refused to abandon? Concrete image first, Laura chained up in that container, butchered by the very cartel Harry was infiltrating. Harry arrives after the fact, finds 3-year-old Dexter sitting in her blood, and rescues him. Abstract claim next, once we know about the affair, that rescue is no longer pure altruism. It's damage control. He's not just saving a child. He's trying to bury the consequences of his own compromised choices, folding Dexter into his family so no one ever connects the dead informant, the affair, and the cop who broke every boundary. To keep this clear, Harry's entire posture shifts. The code isn't a gift from a wise father. It's a retrofit justification built on top of a catastrophic failure. He didn't just stumble on a budding psychopath and decide to manage it. His undercover work, his relationship with Laura, and his inability to walk away from a dirty investigation created the exact conditions that produced Dexter's trauma, then gave him a reason to keep that trauma close. And then there's the suicide. For years, Dexter believes Harry died of illness, the body giving out after a life of stress. But the flashback we finally see is much sharper, much more damning. Teenage Dexter in a kill room, dismembering a victim according to the code. Harry walks in. He sees the plastic, the saw, the blood. He sees his theory made flesh. Days later, he overdoses in a hospital bed. That is not random timing. That is a man choosing death over facing what he has built. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this pattern. Harry reaches for control, the plan collapses, and he refuses to live with the consequences. From Dexter's perspective, this is the moment the floor drops out. The father he trusted absolutely is revealed as corrupt, weak, and driven by guilt. Not higher moral clarity. Not some elevated psychology. Just a cop who lied, cheated, and, when the experiment became real, ran. The focus is not just on Harry's hypocrisy, it's on what that does to the code itself. If the architect was covering his tracks, then the code isn't a moral compass at all. It's a coping mechanism. A story Dexter tells himself to survive the chaos Harry left behind. And once that story is exposed, Dexter has to decide, does he keep living by a dead man's lie, or admit that he's outgrown the only rulebook he ever had? And that's exactly where Hannah McKay walks in. not as another mentor with a rulebook, but as living proof that Harry's design was never the only way to survive the darkness. She's a killer, yes, but she doesn't arrive with a code. She arrives with recognition. We watch Dexter test her the way Harry trained him to test everyone. Background check. Behavioral tells. A private investigation into her psychology and her past murders. By Harry's standards, Hannah is a target. She poisons people. She evades justice. She should end up on plastic. Instead, Dexter hesitates. Then he falls in love with the woman on his table. That single deviation exposes the central question. What happens when someone understands Dexter's darkness and doesn't try to cage it? Hannah doesn't lecture him about control. She doesn't insist on victim selection criteria or ritual purity. She accepts the monster and the man in the same breath, which Harry never really did. In those scenes where she calmly watches him clean up or helps him protect Harrison, the focus is not just on complicity. It's on the alternative she represents. Intimacy without a code as referee. That's where Harrison changes from background prop to existential problem. Dexter's love for his son forces him to think beyond Harry's framework. He doesn't want to weaponize Harrison the way Harry weaponized him. No plastic sheeting, no training kills, no whispered rules about deserving it. But if he's not going to pass down the code, what does he pass down instead? We see him try to model normal emotion and fail in small, devastating ways. The birthday parties where his smile feels half-learned. The bedtime reassurances that ring hollow because we know he's planning a kill an hour later. To keep this clear, Dexter is improvising a new identity in real time. Not predator, not student, but father. And Harry's voice, the one that used to narrate every decision, starts to fade at the edges. Notice how inner voice Harry is sidelined in key moments about Harrison's future. When Dexter decides to send Harrison away with Hannah, Harry doesn't deliver a lecture about abandonment or risk. There's no neat rule to quote. Dexter is making a call Harry never anticipated, and that silence is loud. Each major section of Dexter's life up to this point had Harry as commentator. Now, when the stakes are highest emotionally, the old ghost mostly watches. Relationally, this is huge. Along the way, Dexter starts to see himself as something Harry never allowed, a man capable of love, not just a monster who mimics it. Planning a future in Argentina with Hannah and Harrison isn't just escapism, it's a direct contradiction of Harry's identity script. The code said he was a necessary evil. Fatherhood suggests he might be necessary for something else. But the consequences of Harry's original plan don't disappear just because Dexter dreams of beaches and fresh starts. As he steps outside the design, the structure Harry built begins to collapse inward. Debra's unraveling, the Bay Harbor Butcher legacy. The literal storm that closes the original series, all of it converges just as Dexter finally imagines a life beyond Harry. The question hanging over the finale is brutal. Can he outrun a system he's only now admitting was broken from the start? Or is the next failure already waiting in the eye of that hurricane? That hurricane doesn't just wipe out Dexter's latest plan for escape. It wipes out the last illusion that Harry's experiment could ever protect the people he loved. We move from storm surge to ICU monitors. Debra on a hospital bed, a bullet in her, a stroke stealing oxygen from her brain, and Dexter standing there in scrubs while machines do the work her body can't. Every beat of that sequence is chained to his world of violence and secrecy. Oliver Saxon only targets Deb because she's chasing him. She only chases him because she's covering for Dexter. She's only covering for Dexter because years of lies have rewired her entire psychology around protecting the brother she was raised to trust. To keep this clear, Debra doesn't just have bad luck in the finale. She walks into that gunfire as the endpoint of a trajectory that started in Harry's living room. Harry raises one child to wear the badge and another to wield the knife, under the same roof at the same dinner table. The idealistic cop and the secret killer both taught that Harry's judgment is the ultimate law. Is it any surprise that by season 7, the rookie who once worshipped procedure is the same woman who executes Lagerta at a shipping yard and helps bury the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation? Her arc is a slow-motion collapse of Harry's family plan. She starts as the bright, foul-mouthed detective chasing the ice truck killer. She ends as someone who has killed her own boss, lied on reports, and literally driven a body to Dexter's boat. Along the way, she keeps asking the central question Harry never let himself face. If the code is right, why does everything around us keep breaking? The answer is written in her hospital chart. Then, Dexter makes the choice Harry never anticipated. He unplugs Deborah's life support. No committee, no ethics consult. Just a brother, a syringe, and a line that suddenly looks very thin between mercy and murder. He wheels her out like cargo, loads her onto the slice of life, and tips her body into the ocean, where he's dumped so many of his deserving victims. The ritual is identical. The intent is not. Or is that just what Dexter tells himself to stay in control? Imagine Harry's ghost in that storm. The daughter he tried to shield from darkness dies because of the son he weaponized to fight it. The cop he groomed to clean up the streets is undone by the killer he trained to clean up the system. That's not a contained miscalculation. That's a catastrophic failure of the entire design. Deborah's death becomes the moral endpoint of Harry's story. The focus is not just on another casualty. It's on the fact that the code doesn't merely fail to protect innocence. It destroys the person Harry loved most after Dexter, and proves, in the starkest way possible, that his attempt to engineer justice has annihilated his own family, and the investigation into that failure isn't over yet. It just shifts to the one person still breathing in the wreckage, Harrison. Harrison survives. Deb doesn't. And then, instead of facing what he's done, Dexter executes one last plan: erase himself. We move from a hospital bed and a hurricane warning to the quietest, strangest image in the entire series: Dexter Morgan, bearded and alone, driving a logging truck through a gray nowhere. To keep this clear, let's kick things off with the basic sequence. Dexter pulls Deb off life support, wheels her body out, and dumps her into the ocean where his trophies used to go. He sails his boat straight into the storm, staging a death that neatly explains every loose thread: the Bay Harbor Butcher, Lagerta, Deb. Meanwhile, Hannah and Harrison wait in Argentina, believing he died a tragic hero. Then the cut. No Miami sun, no blood orange sky, no voiceover. Just a bleak logging camp, a bare room, and Dexter sitting at a table, staring into the camera like a man trapped inside his own punishment. The central question in that final tableau isn't how did he get here, it's who's missing. For 8 seasons, Harry's ghost has been welded to Dexter's psychology, narrating, arguing, advising, second-guessing. But in the lumberjack ending, Harry is gone. No inner lectures, no code recitations, no spectral cop in a windbreaker. That silence does more than change the soundscape. It signals that Dexter has cut himself off from the code and from the father who authored it. On the surface, this looks like a rejection of Harry's entire project. Harry wanted a controlled killer inside society, a son who could have a job, a family, and a ritualized outlet for the darkness. Dexter's self-imposed exile is the opposite. No family, no forensics lab, no investigation board on the wall, just labor, isolation, and routine. Yet underneath, the focus is not just on rebellion. It's on how deeply Dexter still believes Harry's core premise, that he is too dangerous to be near anyone he loves. He doesn't stay away from Harrison because he suddenly sees himself as capable of change. He stays away because he has finally accepted Harry's central lie as absolute truth. I am a monster. I destroy everything. So the only ethical plan left is disappearance. In this video, we're going to keep tracing how that lie shapes every later move. And that brings us to the darker mirror. Harry swallowed pills in a hospital room rather than confront what he had turned his son into. Dexter vanishes into a frozen exile rather than stand in a courtroom or in front of Harrison and name what he's done. 2 generations, same escape route, not accountability, but self-erasure. Along the way, the show is quietly telling us that even when Harry's voice finally stops talking, Harry's design still runs the system. The code is collapsed, the family is gone, but the verdict remains. Dexter believes he is beyond redemption, so he builds a life that proves it. And that belief is exactly what New Blood is going to put on trial. So when we fade in on Iron Lake, it's not just a time jump, it's the logical endpoint of that verdict. Dexter has sentenced himself to exile. No code, no family, no Harry. Just Jim Lindsay, the quiet guy at the Fred's fishing game counter, selling rifles and ammo to people who have no idea the Bay Harbor butcher is ringing them up. Snowmobiles idling outside, a small-town police chief who happens to be his girlfriend, a cabin in the woods where everything is neat, labeled, controlled. For nearly a decade, he hasn't killed. No plastic. No slides. No internal debates with the ghost of a dead cop. On the surface, this looks like success. The plan worked. He stopped. But listen to the silence. That's the point. Inner voice Harry is gone because Dexter is trying to suffocate the entire psychological system Harry built. Instead of intricate rules and late-night investigations, he clings to simple routines. Feed the goat. Open the shop, go dancing at the bar, run in the snow. He's not following the code. He's avoiding any situation where the code would even be needed. To keep this clear, New Blood opens by stripping away the mechanism we've relied on for 8 seasons. No running commentary, no spectral Harry correcting his technique. The focus is not just on Dexter's self-control, but on the vacuum where that old framework used to be. Without Harry, there's no externalized conscience, no imagined supervisor. Just a man white-knuckling his way through abstinence, pretending the dark passenger is dead because he refuses to say its name. And then Harrison walks into the store. It's not subtle. The past doesn't call, it doesn't send a file. It shows up in a teenage body with Dexter's eyes and a backpack full of abandonment issues. Harrison is Harry's legacy made flesh, the child Dexter left behind, carrying the genetic question the show has been circling for years. Is this thing inheritable? Did Harry create one monster or 2? In this video, we're going to treat that entrance as more than fan service. It's the collapse point of Jim Lindsay's fragile identity. Along the way, every scene between them becomes an investigation into Harry's influence. Harrison wants answers. Dexter wants to stay Jim. The central question becomes, can he reconnect as a father without reactivating the very system that destroyed the first version of his family? That illusion shatters with Dexter's first kill in New Blood. The moment he corners Matt Caldwell in the cabin, there's no plastic ritual, no carefully researched file, no Harry stepping in to tighten the moral screws. It's rage, improvisation, and a desperate, almost physical relief. He breaks a 10-year abstinence with a murder that doesn't meaningfully satisfy the code, it satisfies the craving. Control gives way to impulse, which means New Blood is not a victory lap. It's the final stress test. Can Dexter raise Harrison without repeating Harry's experiment? Or will the gravitational pull of the code drag both of them into the same pattern of training, secrecy, and sacrificial love that has already killed one Morgan family. The answer is coming, and Iron Lake is about to turn into the lab where that last plan either holds or finally, irreversibly, collapses. Iron Lake answers that question fast. Harrison doesn't just have a temper. He has a history. Self-harm, scars on his arm, stories about accidents at school, the wrestling match where he snaps and nearly crushes a kid's arm for bullying another student. From a razor at his wrist to a blade in his hand, the imagery is unmistakable. We're looking at a teenager shaped by abandonment, violence, and lies. To keep this clear, Harrison is not a copy-paste of young Dexter. His trauma is conscious. He remembers Rita's blood. He remembers waking up alone. His violence is tangled up with depression, rage, and a desperate need to be seen, not the blank detachment we saw in Dexter's childhood flashbacks. But for Dexter, the pattern is close enough. The central question in his mind is simple and terrifying. Did my son inherit my darkness? And once that question lands, Dexter does exactly what Harry did. He does not call a real therapist. He does not hand Harrison over to trained psychology or even Angela's support network. His first plan is control. Confide in the boy, share the secret, offer a productive outlet for all that anger. In this video, we're going to track how that impulse isn't just bad parenting. It's a near-perfect reboot of Harry's experiment. Watch the way Dexter's language shifts once he believes Harrison has the same urges. He starts talking about rules, about making sure they only hurt people who deserve it. He literally walks Harrison through crime scene logic, the same way Harry once walked him through animal corpses and blood spatter. When Dexter takes Harrison to kill Kurt, it plays like a twisted rite of passage, the code as a family heirloom, passed down in a kill room instead of a living room. He even invokes Harry explicitly. My father taught me a code, he tells Harrison, framing it as the only thing that kept him from becoming a monster. That's the pattern interrupt. We know, and Dexter now knows, that this is a lie. Harry's code didn't prevent catastrophe. It engineered it. Yet Dexter still reaches for that same broken tool, because it's the only structure he's ever trusted. But Harrison doesn't fit the mold. He's confused when Dexter celebrates Kurt's death, like a bonding moment. He's horrified when he pieces together that Dexter killed Logan, a genuinely decent cop, just to protect the plan. Harrison wants justice, not ritualized murder. He wants honesty, not an apprenticeship in dismemberment. The focus is not just on his resistance, it's on how that resistance exposes Dexter's trajectory toward becoming the very father he's been reevaluating all season. This becomes the final relational test. Will Dexter keep forcing the code onto Harrison until the boy breaks? Or can he finally admit that Harry was catastrophically wrong, that this entire framework is a moral and operational failure? The next beat will answer whether the cycle ends in Iron Lake, or whether another Morgan son gets locked into a lifetime of secrets, investigations, and inevitable collapse. Logan's death is the moment the code stops being theory and becomes a body on the floor. A good man, a coach, a cop who actually believes in rules. If Harry's system is ever going to prove it has real moral weight, it has to hold here. It doesn't. Dexter is in a holding cell, the investigation finally catching up. His plan to stay hidden in Iron Lake completely collapsed. Angela has the evidence. The Bay Harbor butcher name is back on the board, and for once, there is no plastic-wrapped contingency waiting in the wings. So he pivots to the only option he thinks he has left: escape at any cost. Logan walks in, just doing his job, and within seconds, Dexter has him in a chokehold, bargaining for his gun. The gun goes off. Logan's neck snaps against the bars. We watch a fundamentally decent man die as nothing more than a speed bump on Dexter's trajectory out of the station. To keep this clear, Logan isn't a dokes circling Dexter with suspicion. He isn't a LaGuerta building a case. He's Harrison's wrestling coach, the guy who gives the kid rides, who cares about his future, who models the kind of grounded masculinity Dexter can't fake. By the code's own language, Logan is as innocent as it gets. Yet when Dexter feels the walls closing in, the most sacred rule, never kill an innocent, evaporates in a few panicked seconds. What does that say about the psychology of this entire framework? The central question Harry wanted the code to answer was whether you could contain a killer with structure, ritual, and rules. In this video, we're going to keep seeing the same answer. Under pressure, the code doesn't restrain Dexter, it rationalizes him. Logan's death exposes that when survival and the code collide, survival wins. The focus is not just on the fact that Dexter kills an innocent, but on how quickly he reframes it as necessary, as justified, as part of the plan to protect Harrison. And Logan is not an isolated tragedy. He slots into a pattern Harry started decades earlier. Dokes dies in a cabin explosion because Dexter needs someone else to carry the Bay Harbor Butcher label. LaGuerta dies in a shipping container because Dexter can't let the investigation land on him. Now, Logan dies in a holding cell because escape matters more than his life. 3 good cops. 3 people actually trying, in flawed ways, to work within a system Harry claimed to respect, all erased as collateral damage of that original decision to train Dexter instead of turning him in. Along the way, the person who sees it clearest is Harrison. He walks in on the aftermath, hears what happened, and you can feel the horror set in. If the code is supposed to protect the innocent, why is Logan dead? If his father only kills those who deserve it, why is his coach lying on a slab? That gap between the rules and the reality is what finally snaps Harrison's belief. Logan's death is the final nail in the code's coffin. If it can't prevent this, it has no moral authority left, only a trail of bodies leading straight back to Harry. If Logan's body is the final nail in the code's coffin, the scene in the woods is the moment Dexter is forced to watch the whole structure collapse on top of him. Snow, sirens in the distance, Dexter bleeding from Harrison's shot. The hunter finally pinned in the open, with no plan left to hide behind. To keep this clear, the confrontation starts as a classic Dexter scramble for control. He frames Logan's death as an accident, an unfortunate byproduct of a necessary escape. He tries to reassert the code, to reframe the situation as one more tactical misstep on the trajectory toward a greater good. But Harrison has already run the investigation in his head. He sees what Dexter refuses to name. Logan didn't die because of a bad angle or a panicked trigger pull. Logan died because Dexter chose his own survival over every supposed rule he lives by. Harrison doesn't just say that. He makes Dexter look at it. He forces him to connect Logan to Rita, to Deborah, to LaGuerta, to everybody that was never on a kill table, but still ended up in Dexter's blast radius. From a coach slumped in a cell to a sister bleeding out in a hospital bed, Harrison lays out the consequences as a pattern, not an exception. The focus is not just on the code failing once, but on how every attempt to live by it inevitably drags innocence into the dark. And for the first time, Dexter actually breaks. The inner Harry we've heard for seasons falls silent. The usual psychological defenses, they were bad, I had no choice, the system failed, ring hollow even to him. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this moment, because it's the one time Dexter's self-mythology loses. He realizes that as long as he's alive, he will keep building new rules, new justifications, new identities, and people like Logan will keep paying the price. That's the moment of clarity. 2 short sentences land like a confession. You're right. I did this. Then, the longer, more devastating realization follows. The only honest act left, the first move that isn't about control or escape or another carefully staged kill room, is to stop. Not to disappear. Not to fake his death again. To let Harrison end it. Harrison's choice is the exact inversion of Harry's philosophy. Harry saw darkness and tried to channel it, to turn a traumatized child into a precision weapon aimed at the worst criminals the investigation system missed. Harrison refuses the premise. He won't be another experiment, another student of the code fine-tuned into a controlled killer. Instead of accepting a ritual, he pulls the trigger on the entire idea that this violence can ever be safely managed. Dexter's death becomes a brutal verdict on Harry's grand design. The only way to stop the cycle is for the son to execute the father. But if that's true here, what does it say about every earlier moment Harry stepped in and redirected Dexter's life? So, if Dexter executing the father's idea is the only thing that finally stops the cycle, we have to turn the scalpel around. Not on the code. On Harry himself. What kind of psychology designs a plan that demands your son kill for you, and then, eventually, because of you? To keep this clear, we have to start with Harry's overconfidence. He walks into that shipping container as a veteran Miami cop, steps into a lake of blood, and decides that his badge and his experience with criminals qualify him to redesign a child's entire psyche. He treats trauma like a crime scene. Identify the pattern, contain the threat, redirect the violence. In his mind, the investigation is complete before Dexter can even speak. Instead of saying, I don't know how to heal this, he says, I know exactly how to use this. That's the core delusion. Professional competence equals godlike authority. Harry knows how killers think, so he assumes he can build one safely. He knows procedure, so he assumes he can write a personal code that will never break. The central question he never asks is the one any real therapist would start with. What if my entire framework is wrong? From there, his hunger for control takes over. Faced with a broken system that lets monsters walk and a son who wants to cut them apart, Harry picks the option that keeps him powerful. He doesn't go to child psychologists. He doesn't risk internal affairs by confessing his failures with Laura Moser. He creates a private justice pipeline. Dexter becomes his off-the-books solution. The secret weapon that proves Harry was right about the system all along. It feels ordered. It feels precise. It's actually a slow-motion collapse. And because control is the priority, Harry is blind to everyone else's agency. He assumes Laura will stay in her role as informant and mistress. He assumes Deborah can be steered into the badge without ever learning why her brother is different. He assumes Dexter will follow the code like scripture. Even colleagues like LaGuerta and Dokes are treated as pieces on his board. He underestimates Dokes' raw instinct and LaGuerta's political intelligence, trusting that his reputation will manage their suspicions indefinitely. It doesn't. Underneath all of this is guilt. Laura's murder, the shipping container, the affair, the cover-ups, every decision afterward is Harry trying to atone without ever stepping into vulnerability. He won't confess to Deb. He won't own Dexter's origin in front of the department. So the apology becomes architectural instead of emotional. Build a code. Build a killer. Build a legacy that says, I did what I had to. His suicide in that hospital room is the final, catastrophic version of the same move. Escape accountability, leave a myth. Here's the pattern interrupt. Harry's greatest flaw isn't that he loved Dexter too little. It's that he loved him in a way that refused uncertainty. He decided his son was a monster, and then engineered a life around that verdict. No vulnerability, no real honesty, no space for Dexter to be anything else. In this video, we're going to see how every later season just keeps proving that once Harry made that call, every plan that followed was already doomed. Harry makes that call once, and then we watch Dexter spend 8 seasons, and a revival unconsciously reenacting it. The pattern isn't subtle. It's baked into how Dexter loves, how he plans, and how he explains every collapse in his life back to the same poisoned logic Harry handed him. Let's kick things off with secrecy, because that's Harry's first real code, long before he formalizes any rules about plastic and knives. He hides Laura Moser. He hides the affair. He hides the fact that Dexter's origin story isn't just a random tragedy. It's fallout from his own undercover investigation. And crucially, he hides his belief that Dexter is unchangeable, a monster to be managed, not a son to be known. That double life becomes the template. Dexter grows up thinking love means never telling Rita what he is, never fully letting Debra into his psychology, never giving Harrison the truth about why people keep disappearing around them. Every major relationship is just Harry's secret family life replayed with new faces. To keep this clear, look at how love itself becomes a weapon. Harry tells himself he's doing this because he loves Dexter. Because no one else will protect this broken child, he will train him. That's the rationalization. When Dexter stands over a plastic-wrapped body later, he's running the same script. With Lumen, he reframes the code as an act of care. He kills for her, with her, telling himself that channeling her trauma into ritual murder is a gift. With Hannah, he insists that eliminating anyone who threatens their future is proof of devotion. The central question is never should I be killing at all, but how can I bend this love to justify another body? Harry weaponizes his bond once, Dexter turns it into a lifestyle. Then there's necessary collateral damage. Harry accepts Laura's death as the price of his operation, then accepts Dexter's darkness as the price of keeping that secret buried. Later, Dexter does the exact same moral math. Dokes is inconvenient to the plan. He lets Leela solve that problem and folds her murder into the cost of staying hidden. LaGuardia gets too close in her investigation. He and Debra decide that one more body in a shipping container is what survival demands. In New Blood, Logan dies because Dexter refuses to surrender cleanly. Each time, he tells himself there was no other choice. That's not new. That's Harry's voice in his head, upgraded for a higher body count. And under all of it is the belief that monsters can't change. Harry tells a young Dexter that this is who he is. Forever, Dexter repeats that verdict to himself every season, even when the evidence keeps contradicting it. His genuine attachment to Harrison, his protective instinct toward Deb, his attempts to stop killing. Instead of seeing those as signs of growth, he treats them as dangerous illusions. So he doubles down on the code, on control, on the same plans that keep failing. Along the way, what we see is that Harry didn't just influence Dexter's methods, he infected the entire operating system. How Dexter defines love, risk, truth, even possibility itself. The next step is to watch how that infection spreads outward, turning every ally, every investigation, every chance at change into another echo of Harry's original, fatal design. Harry sits at the center of that design. And the central question we have to wrestle with is deceptively simple. Was he saving Dexter or building a weapon he could no longer control? To keep this clear, let's kick things off with the case for Harry as a tragic hero. Picture that shipping container floor, 3-year-old Dexter frozen in his mother's blood, while Miami cops gag at the smell. Harry is the one who walks in, the one who lifts that child out of literal carnage. From there, every flashback of him teaching Dexter to fake smiles at school, to channel urges into animal killings, to follow the code, can be read as a desperate plan to prevent another Brian, another ice truck killer, from ever emerging. He studies crime scenes, tracks offenders the courts let walk, and redirects Dexter toward people he believes are already monsters. In that reading, he sacrifices his own peace, his reputation as a clean cop, even his relationship with Deb, to manage a horror no one else can see. He's not just a father, he's the first and only person to stand between Dexter and total collapse. But then we flip the frame, and the investigation into Harry's psychology gets darker. Because Harry doesn't just guide Dexter, he exploits him. He discovers a traumatized child with bloodlust and, instead of intensive therapy, builds a private death squad. He has an affair with Laura Moser, entangles Dexter's origins with his own corruption, and then lies about all of it for decades. He teaches Dexter to manipulate everyone, including Deb, while presenting himself to the world as the ideal family man. On that view, Harry is a villain in plain clothes, a cop who corrupts the justice system by turning his son into an off-the-books executioner, and when he finally sees teenage Dexter dismembering a body, he doesn't stay and fix what he broke. He runs. His suicide becomes the ultimate evasion of responsibility, leaving Dexter alone with a weaponized code and no living author to challenge it. So which is it, hero or villain? The focus is not just on the label, but on Harry as a desperate man in way over his head. Along the way, we see love, fear, and guilt braided into every decision. He loves Dexter and Deb. He fears what Dexter could become. He drowns in guilt over Laura, over his dirty cases, over every criminal who slipped through a broken system. His plan is catastrophic, but his intent is not mustache-twirling evil. It's a panicked attempt at control by someone who no longer trusts institutions or himself to do the right thing. And even if Harry had chosen differently, would we be guaranteed a better trajectory? Imagine he commits Dexter to a hospital. Does a system that missed the Bay Harbor butcher pattern really contain a child shaped by a chainsaw massacre? Imagine full transparency and therapy. Does a teenage Dexter, already fantasizing about knives, respond to talk alone? Imagine Harry does nothing. No code, no training, just hoping the urges fade. Each option carries its own risk, its own potential for failure, its own version of the same nightmare. In this video, we're going to keep circling that ambiguity, because that's where Harry's power as a character lives. He isn't a mastermind pulling flawless strings. He's a flawed human whose attempt to control evil multiplies it instead, echoing through every season. And the real twist is this. Once we accept that, we have to ask whether Dexter ever truly had a chance to escape the blueprint Harry left behind, or whether every later plan was already doomed the moment Harry first said the word code. So when we ask whether Dexter ever really had a chance, we're also asking something darker. Did he ever really have a choice? Or was he just executing Harry's plan long after Harry was gone? From the outside, Dexter's self-image is crystal clear, meticulous planner, forensic expert, a man who lives and dies by the code. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room, leave no evidence. He narrates his life like an investigation report, as if every variable is under control. But when we track the actual trajectory, the pattern is different. Chaos, collateral damage, and a body count that stretches far beyond the men on his tables, all radiating from the design Harry imposed. To keep this clear, we have to go back to the psychology Harry built into him. As a child, Dexter doesn't just discover a dark passenger on his own. Harry names it, frames it, and then insists it's inevitable. Harry walks into a shed, sees teenage Dexter dismembering a man, and instead of asking whether this boy can be saved, he systematizes it. He tells Dexter he'll always have these urges, that killing is the only release, that the code is the only barrier between him and total collapse. That's not guidance. That's a script. And Dexter grows up believing there is no other genre available, which is why the moments when he drifts off script feel so jarring. They're not just emotional beats. They're glimpses of a self Harry never allowed him to imagine. With Lumen in Season 5, Dexter doesn't just apply the code, he bends it, kills for someone else's trauma, and actually considers partnership that isn't rooted in Harry's rules. With Brother Sam, he hesitates at the edge of vengeance, lets mercy into a space Harry trained him to keep sterile. And with Harrison, especially in New Blood, we watch him wobble between repeating the code and wanting, desperately, to be a different kind of father. These aren't just failures of control. They're failed attempts at autonomy. Here's the pattern interrupt. What if Dexter's sloppiest, most disastrous decisions are also his first real choices? When he lets Harrison pull the trigger in that final snowy clearing, Harry's voice is gone. No ghost in the passenger seat, no code to rationalize the outcome. The central question becomes brutal. Is this Dexter finally seizing agency, or just passing his lack of it to the next generation? He engineers his own death, but he does it by inviting his son to become exactly what Harry once told him he had to be. In this video, we're going to lean into that ambiguity, because the focus is not just on whether Dexter controls his urges, but on when he starts to wake up to the fact that they were curated for him. Seen through Harry's story, the series stops looking like a chronicle of a killer mastering his impulses and starts reading as a long, slow jailbreak from someone else's blueprint. Each major section will keep testing that idea, asking whether any move Dexter makes is truly his, or just the last echo of a plan he never consented to. So to keep this clear, let's kick things off by running Harry's entire trajectory as one broken plan. Before there was a Bay Harbor butcher investigation, before Iron Lake, there was Harry Morgan, idealistic Miami cop, the man who pulls a 3-year-old out of a shipping container and decides he can outthink trauma itself. We watch him start as the archetype of control. He rescues Dexter, adopts him, pairs him with Debra, and tries to rebuild a normal family over an ocean of blood. Then the cracks, the affair with Laura Moser, the undercover work that gets her butchered, the revelation that Dexter's nightmares are not just psychological scars, but a compulsion he can't repress. Harry's answer is the code, not therapy, not accountability, a system. He trains a child to stalk animals, to study crime scenes, to clean up. He wraps murder in rules and calls it protection. From there, every season is another layer peeled off the Harry myth. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that gap between the inner voice Harry Dexter worships and the frightened cop the flashbacks reveal. Operationally, Harry's design fails first. The code promises perfect logistics, only kill the guilty, leave no trace, stay ahead of every investigation. Yet the Bay Harbor butcher case is literally built from Harry's blueprint. Dexter's job in forensics, his blood slides, his ritual dumps in the ocean, these are supposed to guarantee control. Instead, Dokes reads his behavior on instinct. Lundy follows the patterns. And the system Harry tried to outsmart almost catches the student he engineered. Relationally, the collapse is worse. Harry's secret mentorship poisons every bond Dexter has. Debra is raised in the shadow of a brother she never truly understands, then forced into Harry's role without consent. LaGuardia dies in the same kind of container where Harry once saved Dexter, a direct consequence of protecting the code over the law. Rita is slaughtered in her bathtub because Dexter believes Harry's rules can coexist with a family fantasy. Deborah's death in the hospital is the final cost of that delusion. How many lives does one plan get to spend before we stop calling it protection? Existentially, Harry cannot live with what he's created. The central question for him isn't, can I manage Dexter? But, what have I turned him into? Walking in on teenage Dexter, dismembering a body answers that. Harry chooses suicide over confession, over admitting to his family and the department that he has been running a private experiment in vigilante murder. And that experiment doesn't end with Dexter. Harrison grows up in the blast radius of Harry's decisions, inheriting a legacy of secrets, violence, and rationalizations. By new blood, the code has mutated into something Harrison must confront directly, forcing a final reckoning over whether this system ever saved anyone at all. Harry didn't just pull a boy from a shipping container. He authored a code that would echo through Dexter and into Harrison, destroying the very people it claimed to shield. The next step is to follow exactly how that destruction plays out, one failed safeguard at a time. Harry didn't just pull Dexter out of a shipping container. He pulled the pin on a grenade and called it a code. Now that we've traced how that blast wave travels from Harry to Dexter to Harrison, we're left with the central question. What exactly is Harry Morgan's legacy? Is he a tragic hero who made the least worst plan in an impossible situation, a cop and father staring at a blood-soaked 3-year-old and trying to wrestle control back from pure chaos? Is he a villain who groomed a killer, using a damaged child as a covert weapon to finish the investigations the system failed? Or is he a desperate father who failed at every turn, a man whose fear, guilt, and secrecy hollowed out both of his children long before any knife ever touched a victim? To keep this clear, we want you to choose one fulcrum, one decision that, in your view, doomed Dexter's life more than any other. Was it that first moment in the shipping yard when Harry discovered Dexter and decided to keep him instead of turning him over to real psychological help or the state? Was it the slow, meticulous construction of the Code of Harry, teaching a boy to dissect animals, to study crime scenes, to see murder as a controlled outlet instead of a red flag? Was it hiding the truth about Laura Moser, transforming an affair, an investigation, and a massacre into a sanitized origin story that Dexter could never fully interrogate? Or was it Harry's suicide in that hospital room, choosing collapse over confession, leaving teenage Dexter alone with a half-explained rulebook and a ghost that would narrate every season of his life? Drop your answer in the comments and go specific. Name the moment, name the scene, and tell us why that's the point where there was no way back. In this video, we're going to keep following Dexter's trajectory, but this is where your investigation starts, because there are alternate timelines hiding in every one of Harry's choices. What if, after seeing young Dexter kill, Harry had chosen therapy instead of training? Would Dexter have become a patient instead of a predator? What if Harry had turned his own son in, trusting prison and the system over his private code? What if he'd sat Deborah down and told her everything? Laura, the affair, the blood, the urges, forcing the family fantasy to collapse while there was still time to rebuild something honest. Along the way, we invite you to rewatch the Harry-centric flashbacks with this new lens. Look for the moments where his mask slips in the car, where his voice catches when he tells Dexter to blend in at school, where fear flashes across his face before Dexter's idealized memory edits it out. The focus is not just on what Harry says about control, but on what his body language betrays about a man who knows this plan is already failing. In trying to control a monster, Harry created a legacy that outlived him. A code, a psychology, a pattern of denial that passed from father to son to grandson. Now it's up to us, as viewers, as a jury, outside the story, to decide whether Harry Morgan is a warning about the consequences of playing God with another person's darkness, or a justification people will keep reaching for when they want to believe their own private code can never collapse. So, what's your verdict? And what if you're wrong?